Good evening, everybody. This is a regular meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment for Wednesday, May 17th, 2023. Notice has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building and sending a copy to the Montclair Times. This is a public hearing which any members of the public are welcome to attend. The meeting agenda is available on the website, as is a link to the Township's YouTube channel where the hearing can be viewed live or after the fact. The hearing is also being televised on Channel 34. I'm going to do roll call now. Mr. Harrison?
Here.
Mr. McCullough is excused. Mr. Caulfield?
Here.
Mr. Church?
Here.
Ms. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Moore? Mr. Vieira?
Here.
Mr. Sullivan?
Here. Okay, we have the minutes of the April 19th meeting. I have a few changes. On page 7, at the end of line 20, I want to add a new sentence. I almost got these to you in advance, but work intervened. Ready?
Yes.
Once the owner of the subject site agreed, no additional sites were explored. And then on page 8, line 8, replace the second sentence, the beginning of the second sentence, the whole rest of that line, some board members threw favor of, and with, there was some discussion of and then continue with approval with conditions. And then on line 11, no, line 10, replace some with most.
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Replace some in the beginning of the first word in the sentence towards the end of the line with most. So it's most board members. And then replace lack of exploring with failure to explore. And then after would on line 12, would provide the required coverage and then not require variances. Any other changes to the minutes? If not, someone would like to move the minutes as amended?
Also move the minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we have the resolution for the Deroui property on Grove Street. I don't have any changes to that resolution. Does anyone else have any changes?
I'll move to approve resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have the resolution for Dr. Rotundo. I don't have any changes to that resolution. Does anyone else have any changes? Not, someone want to move the resolution?
I'll move that resolution, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have the resolution for the Dish Wireless application. I don't have any changes. Does anyone else have any changes? Not, someone want to move the resolution?
I'll move the resolution, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Any abstentions? And we have the Taft resolution on Argyle Road. Condition 1, you have East Circuit Drive, that's West Circuit Drive because it's on the west side of the park. Anyone else with any other changes to that resolution? If not, someone want to move the resolution as amended?
I'll move the resolution as amended, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the first application is that of the Montclair Historical Society, the property located at 108, 110 Orange Road. This is an application for site plan approval for various site improvements. The property is located in the R1 one-family zone and is designated on the township tax maps as Block 1304, lots 11 and 12. Museums are a permitted conditional use in the R1 zone, subject to certain conditions. The applicant is requiring for variances, for conditional use variance, since to permit 16 on-site parking spaces, whereas Montclair Code Section 347-42 requires 235 parking spaces. A conditional use variance to permit a parking area to be set back less than 10 feet from the south property line, whereas the ordinance requires the parking area set back 10 feet from property lines. Variance from Montclair permit several rooms in existing buildings to be used as office space, whereas office uses are not permitted in the zone. Yeah.
Did you ask about?
Are-
Yes.
I assume the property is tax exempt, but is the notice in order?
It is, yes.
Mr. Trembulack, you want to give your appearance?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Alan Trembulack appearing on behalf of the applicant, Montclair Historical Society, which is also known as the Montclair History Center. This is, the Montclair Historical Society is a nonprofit corporation which was organized in 1965. Purposes of the organization are to promote and preserve local history of the Montclair community through a variety of educational and other programs. There'll be more testimony provided by the applicant regarding the nature of the society and how these properties are used. This is an application for site plan approval for various exterior improvements to the property located at 108 and 110 Orange Road, which contains, as you probably know, several historical residential buildings, including the Israel Crane House and the Nathaniel Crane House. The improvements that are proposed, which are mostly in the rear of the property and almost all exterior improvements, are intended to provide better accessibility to the historic buildings, to provide an improved, safer parking area in the rear of the property, as well as walkways, and other improvements really intended to enhance accessibility and also provide for increased safety for vehicles and pedestrians. We're also proposing some minor modifications to two of the buildings in order to provide an accessible bathroom and a ramp for the Clark House and an accessible entrance ramp for the Nathaniel Crane House. We're not proposing, other than those minor modifications for barrier-free improvements, we're not proposing any changes to the existing buildings. The property is located in the R1 one-family zone district and is considered to be a museum use. Museums are permitted as conditional uses in the R1 zoning district, subject obviously to various conditions. As part of this application, we're seeking two conditional use variances for the number of required parking spaces, as well as a variance to permit parking area to be located closer than 10 feet to one of the property lines. There's a third variance that we added after the initial application was filed. After we filed the initial application, it came to my attention that there were several rooms in the Clark House that were being rented out to third parties who had no association or affiliation with the History Center. Apparently, that's something that's been going on for for many years. When I learned of it, discussed it with my client, and we agreed that we needed to disclose this to the board as part of this application and to seek relief in order to hopefully legitimize that office use. So consequently, we filed an amended application seeking an additional D1 variance for the office uses in the Clark House. So that's the nature of the application. I have 4 witnesses to present. The first witness will be Angelica Diggs, who's the executive director of the organization, followed by Paul Anderson, who will testify regarding the site plan. And after him, Paul Sionis will testify regarding landscaping, lighting, and the building modifications. And then our 4th and final witness will be Charles Height, who's our professional planner. So, having said that, I'd like to call Angelica Diggs.
Mr. Trevor, before we do that, this application involves variances. You need 5 affirmative votes. Full complement of the board is 7. You'll see there's only 5 board members here, and I guess you wish to proceed.
I think we'd like to proceed, and then we have to make a decision whether we go to a vote tonight or ask to postpone.
Okay. Thank you. Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth of the matter pending before the board? State your name and address, please.
Angelica Diggs. My home address is 26 Mine Hill Road, and that's in Hackettstown, New Jersey, 07840.
And Mr. Scabilia, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth of the matter pending before the board?
I do.
Just state your name and position with the township.
Tommy Sibilia, Assistant Planner, Secretary to the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Thank you.
Okay. Angelica, are you an employee of the Montclair History Center?
Yes, I'm the executive director of the Montclair History Center, yes.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, I don't have to push
You
it.
don't
I'm
have to
sorry.
push.
Thank you.
All right, you're executive director. How long have you held that position?
I've held that position since August of 2022, last year.
Okay. Would you provide the board with some background information regarding just what the Montclair History Center is and what the goals and objectives are, the mission of the organization, et cetera?
Absolutely. So the mission, as Alan kindly stated briefly before, as a nonprofit organization, we were founded in 1965 as the Montclair Historical Society. So our mission is to preserve, educate, and share Montclair's local history and to really share the stories of Montclair's community that make what we are today. We are a private 501c3 nonprofit organization.
Okay, and does the organization own the 2 properties located at 108 and 110 Orange Road?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Those are 2 separate tax lots, I believe, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And can you talk about there are several structures on the property. Would you just discuss the structures and how they're used?
Absolutely. So the first structure I'll mention, which is referred to as its historic designation as the Israel Crane House. This is our Crane House and Historic YWCA Museum. This is where we field a lot of our educational programs through. This space tells the story of from 1796 through 1900 of the Crane family, the enslaved people and servants who were part of the household. It was also a segregated YWCA for black women and girls from 1920 to 1965. And we also talk about the history of its formative years as a historical society when it was founded in 1965 through 70. So primarily field trips and programming happen through this space. We also own the Clark House, which is our museum offices, our research library, and our archives. This space holds up to about 10,000 archival documents and materials, ranging things from Montclair directories, postcards, photographs, oral histories, you name it. So it's a really valuable resource used by the public. Homeowners come in, teachers, students, our staff use it for our own educational research and programming as well. We also own the Nathaniel Crane House, which is the 3rd structure on our property. This is primarily used as a visitor center when the museum is open for tours. Also additional education exhibit space for field trip programming and our museum store.
Okay. And is there also a garden or meadows on the property as well?
There are. So a bit of our property includes, we have historic herb gardens, as well as some native and perennial meadows that are in development by our gazebo, and also home to the Montclair Community Farms Coalition. So we use these spaces, again, for educational purposes, particularly to talk about Montclair's agricultural past and history.
Okay. I think maybe you already covered this, but I was going to ask you to discuss the types of programs and events that take place on the property.
Oh, sure, and I have some nice photographs, too. Truly what our mission serves is primarily heavily educational field trips, and that includes K through high school students that come to our sites. We also do a lot of programming out in the community that includes things like walking tours around different neighborhoods, lecture, film series, some things on Zoom, as well as on and off-site outreach programming, you name it. So we do a variety of public benefit programs each year.
Okay. And,
Mr. Treviak, what we're seeing up on the screen, is that part of the PowerPoint?
you know, I apologize.
Oh, that's
Sitting
sitting right in
with
front of
these.
me.
No, that's my fault. We may have the copies. This is the PowerPoint that's on the screen.
All right, we're going to mark that as Exhibit A1.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about the staff
Sure.
of the organization?
Absolutely. We are a small team, so that includes 2 full-time staff members, one of which is myself, 4 part-time staff members, and then we have per diem educators that come in just seasonally for the field trip season.
Okay. And what are generally the hours of operation?
Our office hours, we are on site Tuesday through Friday, typically from about 9 to 4. But we do sometimes hold public tours or things on Sundays as well.
Okay. All right. I'd like to move on and ask you to provide the board with an overview of the improvements that are being proposed for the property, which is why we're here this evening.
Sure. So just to talk a little bit about the site challenges that have brought us to our application today. One of our biggest challenges is that the Clark and Nathaniel Crane houses have no barrier-free access into them. They are historic buildings. And there is no ADA accessible bathroom inside the Clark house, which we do use a lot for historians or researchers that come in. So that has posed some issues to us. Additionally, we're seeking site improvements that will make pathways towards areas like the meadows, the gardens of the farm, more accessible, or to eliminate steps that are barriers for people on site to the grounds. We have, I'll use the word loosely, a parking lot. It's essentially dirt and gravel. It's not a striped lot, so it causes chaotic parking at times. We also have a 1-lane driveway as it stands now. And that is to provide traffic for in both directions, which also can cause safety and issues on site when people are going into the parking lot itself. So our proposed changes are to add the accessibility ramps into the Nathaniel Crane house, the accessibility ramp into the Clark house, as well as the ADA accessible bathroom, improve the pathways around the property to the gardens, as well as create an additional driveway lane so that there is ingress and egress separately, that so eliminates those barriers and safety issues on site, and provide permeable pavers onto the site and striped parking, which will also increase the number of parking spaces available.
Has the organization received any grant money?
Yes, so
for this project?
we did. We received a grant from the New Jersey Historic Trust, so that's over $360,000. So that's a match towards the project, and we have a number of other pending grants as well. The New Jersey Historic Trust essentially is a partner in the project, so they review and have approved already all the plans that have been submitted tonight that meet the Secretary of the Interior standards.
Okay. You mentioned the accessibility or barrier-free access that's being added to the Clark House and the Nathaniel Crane House. Right? Other than that, are there any other modifications to those buildings or additions to those buildings being proposed?
So the small addition to the back of the Clark House is to provide the ADA accessible bathroom, as it cannot go on the interior to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards, and that just provides an entranceway to the bathroom and then into the site itself.
Will there be any increase in the amount of occupiable space in any of the buildings?
No, there will not.
Okay. And do you anticipate that there will be any changes in how the property will be used after these improvements are completed?
No, this is to maintain the current programming and those we serve.
And you don't anticipate any additional programming or expansion of programming activities?
No, we do not.
Okay. Just want to ask you to address, I think, two comments in Mr. Scabiglia's report. One, he mentioned the fact that there apparently were a couple of weddings on the property in the last year or so. Can you talk about that?
Sure. There were 2 weddings held in November of 2022 this past year. One was for a staff member of the Montclair History Center marrying a volunteer of the Montclair History Center. The other wedding similarly was for caretakers of the Montclair History Center, which was essentially a backyard wedding. We do not advertise, nor do we plan to ever commercially hold weddings on site.
All right, you have no plans for any future weddings on the property?
No, that is
Okay,
correct.
and you understand that the use of the property as a wedding venue would not be permissible under the Montclair zoning ordinance?
We understand.
Okay. Are there any plans to provide a trash enclosure on the property?
Yes, excuse me. We're actually working with an Eagle Scout and Boy Scout troop from Glen Ridge. So we are in the midst of planning the trash enclosure, which is going to be located on the side of the Clark House. I apologize, I don't have the north-south elevation. But when facing the Clark House from the street, it'll be on the left side, completely enclosed, and have a roof structure as well. So that is currently being planned as we speak.
Okay. All right. Then I want to talk about the office uses, the office tenants that I mentioned in my opening remarks. Does the Montclair History Center currently rent offices in the Clark House to third parties who have no relationship to the History Center?
That is correct. There are 4 offices.
Okay, and I realize you've only been the executive director for less than a year, but in speaking with other people, have you been able to determine how long that practice of renting offices out has gone on?
It appears for about 15 years.
Okay. All right. And where are those offices located in the Clark House?
Sure. So we have 3 levels to the Clark House. The offices are on the 2nd level.
Okay. And how many are there currently?
There are 4 offices.
Okay. And you have 4 tenants?
That is correct.
And do they each occupy one of the offices?
Correct. They are a 1-room space they occupy.
Okay. Are there any conference rooms or common facilities on the 2nd floor other than obviously hallways?
No, there are not.
Okay. And do you know roughly how big those offices are?
Each office is probably a little over 300 square feet,
So I'm talking maybe a total of about 1,200.
roughly. Yeah, or perhaps a little
Just
less.
for the record, Mr. Moore has now arrived.
Do any of those, why don't you identify who the current tenants are?
Sure. Within those 4 offices, one is a home office used by a film editor. One is a home office used by a professional licensed therapist. One is an office for an acupuncturist, and one is for a masseuse.
Do any of those tenants have employees?
No, they do not.
Okay. Do any of them see clients or customers or patients on the property?
2, the acupuncturist and masseuse see clients by appointment only.
Okay. And where do the tenants park?
Some choose to park in the lot. Others sometimes just choose to use the street.
Okay. And what about their hours of operation? Do you know?
They vary. On average, I would say our on-site may be up to 3 days a week, One of them might be on site more like 4. It can vary each week.
Okay. Is there any signage on the property that identifies the office tenants?
There is a directory located in the back of the building by the entrance door.
Okay, it's nothing visible from the street?
No.
Okay, and it's just a directory sign that has a list of the names of the
Correct.
tenants?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I assume you have no plans to install any additional signage?
No, we do not.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Ms. Harris, do you have any questions? Mr. Caulfield?
Good evening. Thanks, Alan, for, letting the board know about the commercial spaces up there, since they knew about 2 weddings that, that occurred. It's best to be forward, I guess. On the, you're pointing to this a year ago, correct? This job, you're taking over, you started a year ago?
As director, I started in August.
In August, okay. And have you done directing work in other locations before, or is this the first time?
Sure, I've been an assistant director at the Museum of Early Trades and Crafts in Madison, and I previously worked for the History Center, but not in a director capacity many years back.
Okay. I'm sure that the tenants in the Crane House help with, their rent is a help for the Historical Society? Is that the reason why they have them there?
Oh, the Clark House offices?
Yeah, the Clark House,
yeah. Yes, it's quite frankly a revenue stream that helps offset our operations, yes.
Okay. In your profession and you're, doing these things, have you ever seen like, kind of renting out office spaces for historical places like that? Have you seen that before?
Oh,
in your
yes, yeah.
profession? Okay. Last question. On the New Jersey Trust, so you come up with the plan that you wanted to develop this and you send the ideas to them, or
Sure.
do you have your plans? Can you just give me a little discussion
Absolutely
about that?
happy to tell you about the process. So we actually had received 2 separate grants from the New Jersey Historic Trust. We have currently an active planning grant, so the trust has fully funded all the architectural site plans that you have already been sent, and they fully fund the construction drawings of everything. So they're very involved in the process of the design and planning for what the modifications happening, because they are designated historic sites and buildings. We then also received funding for the construction phase of the project. So once we finalize and approve our plans, our construction drawings, the trust then works with us to go into the construction phase. They help oversee the bidders, make sure they're qualified, and the process as well. Yep. And so there's a lot of reporting and meetings that happen with the entire project team.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Church?
I have no questions, Mr.
Mr. Moore? Mr. Vieira?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi. Just to follow up on that question, so the New Jersey Historic Trust, they do participate in the planning process,
Yes.
and they get to see the plans, and they have basically provided feedback, and they.
Oh, yes. And part of the reason why we had to delay our meeting, our application for tonight, was because of the revisions we were doing hand in hand with the New Jersey Historic Trust to make sure it meets their standards as well.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to follow up a little on the office space, and it's not so much a concern with what exists today, but making sure we impose conditions that don't let it turn into something bigger and better or worse from my perspective. And I'm assuming the office space, these were existing rooms in the Clark House that,
Yes, that's correct.
okay, so would you have a problem if we put a condition on saying that there would be no modification of the rooms to accommodate additional office use?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And would you have a problem with limiting the office space to the second floor?
No problem. Mhm.
And what of limiting the number of employees?
That, not a problem as well.
Okay. And I want to do the weddings, again, it's an issue of, I don't, we had the same issue with the Van Vleck property, and I don't really have a problem if you have a future staff member who wants to get married and use the property. On the other hand, I just don't want it to suddenly become a wedding venue, which I suspect once these improvements are done, people will see it as, gee, what a wonderful space, and look, we can use the nice gazebo for the ceremony. And so if we limited it to only weddings of people directly associated with the History Center, would that be acceptable?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, any members of the audience who have questions for this witness? Okay, want to call your next witness?
Thank you, yes. Paul Anderson?
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Anderson. Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address, please.
Paul Anderson, 40 Miller Drive, Boonton Township, New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I'm offering Mr. Anderson as a professional engineer. Will you accept his qualifications given his prior appearances before the board?
Your license is still current?
They are in good standing.
We accept him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Paul, you prepared the site plan for this application?
I did.
Okay. All right. I'd like you to review the site plan. I think probably the best place to start would be to talk about the existing conditions on the site and then go into what's proposed.
Correct. So on the screen is SP2, which is my demolition plan, which basically shows the existing conditions of the site. So I'd like to point out, oops, this doesn't work. No, mine does. Find it. Guess I can't find it. Pointer. Nope. All right. Yeah, I do. It wasn't working. Oh, there it is. It is working now. Let me go back one more. All right, let me try again. All right, so this is the single driveway that comes up from the street. It is at about 10% pitch, and then you have this gravel parking lot here, and this kind of mix of grass, gravel stuff. If you've been there, you see that it's kind of a mishmash of stuff. And what is a gravel type of driveway that goes down to the garage in the back. That's the existing conditions. There's a gazebo up on the hill. There's no walking trail around it. There's no way to get it, just separate walking across the grass. One of the things of interest here is that there is a second curb cut down at the street, and it appears that along to the left of this existing drive was previously another driveway. So someone at some point in time removed that driveway, did not remove the curb. So we go to the next. This is our proposed site plan. We propose to reinstall the driveway on the left side. Basically pave the driveway with asphalt and curbing on each side at the existing grade, and get to the back where we will provide a paver parking lot. The darker color paver here is the porous pavement that we have as part of our drainage system that takes all of the stormwater from inlets on site as well as what directly falls on top of the asphalt. As you know, porous pavers are green technology for water quality, so it provides a water quality element. This project is a minor stormwater project. We do not have an acre of disturbance. We do not have a quarter acre of new impervious, but we did provide stormwater management underneath the parking lot with the next thing where we have a pipe underneath that the water goes from the porous pavement down to a storage pipe, absorbs into the ground. When it overflows, it'll overflow down through a pipe down to the drainage system in Orange Road. We have two inlets at the edge of the driveway, on each side of the driveway, to pick up water that comes down the driveway that doesn't get captured above. So I believe we've handled the stormwater element here in accordance with the minor stormwater standards. We have, in terms of the accessibility element, which is important to this project, we have a walkway between the two buildings here that's accessible with accessibility ramps on both sides, ADA ramps on both sides. We have an access ramp, new access ramp to the building here. We have another ramp that comes through the herb garden and back up to the parking lot and across to the building in the rear, and now a smooth walking path around the meadow where you can get up to the gazebo and provide accessibility to the rear of the property with some seating, benches, and also an accessible entrance to the building in the rear, as well as the garden that's off to the right-hand side here. In our parking, we're proposing 16 parking spaces. It doesn't meet the standard, which is a questionable standard in terms of the number required for a facility this size, in terms of the ratio that's noted in the ordinance. We do have one ADA parking space, which is the requirement based on the ADA code, meeting all the slope standards, size standards to get into the buildings. We have one EV parking space located immediately adjacent to it, so it could be used for either the ADA space or the regular parking space that is adjacent. And let's see what else we have. The other issue that we have a review memo from the board's consulting engineer, Marisa Tiberi. There's only two elements of that report that I'd like to discuss this evening.
Mr. Anderson, you're looking at the May 10 report, is that correct?
That is correct, May 10, 2023. So there's two items. Item number 13, she asked if we could look at regrading the driveway to a flatter slope within the first 20 feet of Argyle Road. And that is problematic in that it lowers the back of the site by, it goes from 10% to say 5, which would be a reasonable adjustment. It's going to lower the back of the site a foot, which makes the accessible ramps that we have and the existing connection at this point more problematic. We have a fairly level parking lot, but it does have a pitch, and if we get another foot to make up across it, it becomes more of a steep parking lot. It kind of defeats some of the purpose of what we're trying to achieve here with a nice, uniform, relatively flat parking lot. So I have driven through the driveway as it is today. It's going to follow that slope. I didn't have any difficulty bottoming out or anything like that, so I think it will function correctly, and I would request that the board consider not requiring that element. The other item is item 21, which is a discussion that she wants to have regarding the removal of a 48-inch diameter tree. That tree is located back here on what is the west side of the proposed parking. It's very close to where the parking spaces are. It is elevated a little bit from the parking lot elevation. If we were to install the parking in that location, we would be taking out probably about half of its root zone on the one side. I don't know that that tree would survive. My observations of that tree, it doesn't look really that healthy anyway. The leaves are kind of very meager right now when they should be in full bloom. But it definitely is in the way, and I think our work will actually put it out. So Paul Sanos will discuss the landscape plan and how that is replaced. So that is the one other item. The other items on the board engineer's comments, we have no issue with. If you want to make them part of the conditions of approval, we have no issue with that.
Okay. A couple of follow-up questions. I realize there's no striped parking on the property now. Do you know how many cars can park?
That really depends on who gets there first. So, and how that person parks. If they park in a way, it can limit it, but I would say on an average day, 10 or 12 parking spaces. And if you want to park further down on the grass, you could probably end-to-end some parking spaces too.
Okay. Can you explain how snow removal will be handled?
They have a private company that comes and plows the snow. They primarily push it into the grass areas. Heavier snows, I presume they could cart it away if they needed to, but right now they just push it into the grass areas, and they would continue to do so.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Harris, do you have any questions?
Is trash removal curbside here, or do you have a service?
I'm not sure. That's probably more of a question for
Curbside.
Angela.
Curbside.
She is confirming that it's curbside, and the Eagle Scouts are building the enclosure.
Okay, and will you add the location of the trash enclosure to your future plans?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Caulfield?
Just the driveways coming up and the pedestrians walking, there's signage for, is there a stop when the pedestrians and the cars get to that point?
We don't have a stop sign, I don't believe, in that location. We certainly could put one.
But you don't, I mean, it's not the giant volume where there's a concern.
There's not a giant
I don't think
volume,
so either.
either pedestrians or cars coming out. So I think that it's similar to someone pulling out of a residential driveway, maybe a little bit more intense than that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Church?
I have no questions.
Mr. Moore?
Maybe I'm missing, but have you looked into drainage?
So we have porous pavement in the back of the parking lot that if you look at the plans, you can see that there's a darker hatching. Those are pavers that have, they're designed in a way that have larger gaps between them that allow stormwater to flow through the paver. And then it goes into what we call a reservoir layer of crushed stone where the water is stored. In this case, I have a trough of stone that goes down a few feet further than that with a large diameter pipe. And that large diameter pipe and the stone all come up to a certain storage volume. So the storage volume as required for a minor storm under the Montclair statute is stored in that stone. And then over time, that water will absorb into the ground.
It'll drain. So that's a part of your, is that the soil erosion and sediment control plan? Is that
No, it's on the grading and utility plan.
SP-4?
Yeah, SP4.
Okay. Grading and utility, okay.
All right.
Have you done a study on like the pooling? On pooling of water in the
A groundwater mounding
Yeah,
analysis?
yeah. Mhm.
I have not done a groundwater mounding analysis. I need to get some permeability data for the soil so I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up on the stormwater management, so the pipe is a perforated pipe, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And do you anticipate any of the water will be conveyed into the existing stormwater pipe, I guess, in Orange Road?
Yes, I do anticipate some will. So we have, by the standard, we have 2 gallons per square foot of new impervious in terms, and that's the storage that we provide. Certain storms will be more intense than that. And we have an overflow pipe from that system that runs down the side of the driveway to an inlet, our final inlet on site, and then it goes diagonally to an inlet that's in the street. So it's conveyed in a pipe to the inlet in the street during larger storm events. There also is going to be some water that flows down the driveway that is going over the asphalt, which is not pervious or porous pavement, and that water will also go into Orange Road. What you need to understand is that this is taking over the increase of stormwater that is coming off the site based on the improvements. All of the stormwater that comes out today is just running over land. There's no control. It's just coming down. So it is all going there currently.
So that was my second question. Currently, you don't have any stormwater management at the site?
There's nothing on site.
Nothing on
No,
site, so
there's-
you're
No, there's
improving.
there's nothing there at all. It just runs because it's sloped from the back of the property to the front, and it just all goes down to Orange Road.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Let's start with the entrance and exit drives. Are there any changes to what is now the existing driveway that you're proposing, other than the curbing? Is that going to be the same width as currently?
It is very close to the same width, but it's an entry on one side and an exit on the
I
other side.
understand.
So that you have double the width, or you can accommodate the cars better.
And currently, on the left side, as you're facing the property, there's a large tree as you get back on the property and a
Mhm.
bunch of shrubs. Are those going to remain in the area between the two driveways?
No, that's one of there's 4 trees to be removed, including the one we've previously discussed. And that evergreen tree in that center portion is going to be removed.
And what about the shrubs that are in that area?
Yeah, they will be also transplanted or removed.
Okay, and then I want to understand, ultimately, this is leading to the oak tree you're proposing to remove, but we'll get there a little bit
Okay.
slowly. I want to understand the difference. You're paving the 2 drives, but what is the difference between the coverage and the remainder of the property in terms of, you have different shading and it's not always clear from your arrows that are pointing as to what's going where.
I'm not sure I understand the question, but if you...
Okay, the lighter shaded area,
All right, so the lighter shaded pavers, the ones that they kind of have a hatch to it, those are normal pavers. Similar in appearance to the others, but they will not have the gaps between them that, that the porous ones do. The ones that are the darker shaded ones that go primarily across 12 of the 16 spaces plus the drive aisle that's associated with them is all porous pavers.
okay, and the piping for the stormwater for that, where is that going to be located in relation to the, where the pavers are located?
It is underneath the, basically right down the middle of the parking lot, underneath the porous pavers. So the porous pavers are, Mr. Chairman, if you look, the porous pavers are up here, and it kind of V's down to the pipe in the middle at the bottom.
And how deep is the pipe?
That's a good question. It is 6 feet. 6 feet down to the
And
bottom.
That'll be, from the way you're describing it, like 24, 25 feet from the edge of the parking area, the western edge of the parking area.
That's correct. That's,
So for the 4 parking spaces that are going up against the large tree, how much excavation has to occur to install those?
It's about, I need a bigger set of plans. Give me a second. It's about a foot below the tree grade. So I have the top of curb at, bottom of curb at 319.8, and I believe that the tree is around 321.
Okay, I mean, I was at the property yesterday. I've been at the property many times in my, and I mean, oak trees leaf out later than most other trees, and I do by the giant oak in my neighbor's backyard. And, you know, it was not fully leafed out, but I didn't see any dead branches. All the young leaves seemed to be there. I didn't see any indication of decline. And then I'll get to Mr. Sionis, which then goes to the next comment in the engineer's review memo of, then why are you planting the red maples in close to the same approximate location? You know, I'm not sure the logic works. I understand this is a big old tree that's roots go out very large distances, and
Yes.
but I think that's part of the reason I'm not, and presumably as the oak probably go down fairly deep, I'm a little less concerned than I would be in some other instances as to its survivability, and particularly with the permeable pavers where it's still going to be getting, you know, you're not cutting off major water source, and, you know, the ground leading up to it's been packed down by the existing parking arrangement, so it's not that you're suddenly taking a grassed area and making it, it's probably going to have, might even have more permeability than what currently exists on the east side.
If I could cut to the chase, I think my speculation is that I believe we're going to cut enough roots that it may not survive, but there's the word may. And so if the board would like to leave it in place, it's not in the middle of a parking space, it's outside of the curb line. We can leave it there at its current grade, and if it starts failing, it can be removed after. And but I do think that it has some possibility that it may not survive. You know, a good chance it may not, but I think if you want to look at it that way and say that it just as likely that it will, then we'll leave it there and remove it at a later date if it starts failing.
Okay, and there are a couple of things in the engineer's recommendation before we blindly say go adhere to everything except for number 13. The stormwater discussion, I want to make sure you are agreeing. It says, we had recommended a ground access with inlets at both sides with a trench drain across each drive. The applicant is requested to agree to an additional improvements should runoff discharge into the roadway and create ponding or an icing condition. Is that something you're agreeing to, or?
I really, you know, right now I have 2 inlets on each corner. If she thinks it's a better design to have a trench drain across both driveways as opposed to those inlets, I'm okay with that.
Okay, I just want to be
Yeah.
sure, because
Yeah,
that,
no, it's an equivalent. It's just-
I don't want to
Yeah.
gratuitously impose a condition.
No, that's fine.
And I was going to do a more specific condition, but number 19, and I probably should have asked the applicant the question, the area, your plans don't show anything, is I guess why I'm asking you. The gap between the garage and the structure to the south, which is currently being used for storage would be a charitable word, but of
Okay.
various things associated. Your plans don't show anything there, and I guess.
That is what, yes, I don't have any plans on, as an engineering basis to store anything there. How they operate the facility, and maybe that's a question more for Angela, but we're just, all my plans show is a replacement of the grass, gravel, whatever you want to call that surface with a paver surface. And, but there was no discussion about storage in that area.
There are a couple that relate to landscaping that I'll ask Mr. Sionis.
Okay.
Any further questions,
Just
board
one question.
members?
Is the detached garage used for parking at all? Would that be considered one of the parking?
I think it's used for
spots?
storage.
Strictly
It-
storage?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have maintenance equipment in there.
Any members of the public who have questions for this witness? Okay, want to call your next witness?
Yes, Paul Sionis?
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth of the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
My name is Paul Sionis. My address is 8 Hillside Avenue, Montclair, New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I'm offering Mr. Sionis as an expert in the field of architecture and landscape architecture.
Excuse me.
Accept his qualification.
We just lost them.
All your licenses are still current?
Yes, they're still
Okay,
current.
we
Thank you.
accept them.
Yeah, I think it's an appropriate starting point to discuss the landscape plan.
Up on the slide is up on the screen is a slide showing the colored version of the landscape plan. Our office was retained to prepare a landscape plan that's based on the new site plan that's proposed. So the goal was to propose new plantings to both enhance the existing site and also the proposed site improvements. There are many existing mature trees on the site, as you can see, around the perimeter of the property. And as Mr. Anderson stated, a total of 4 trees are proposed to be removed, primarily because of their locations in proximity to the proposed parking improvements and the proposed driveways. You started discussing the existing oak tree already, so I'll just continue with that. I was told that preference was to remove the oak tree, that it's dropped branches over the last few years. Last year in particular, it dropped a large branch on someone's car and did a lot of damage. The History Center is worried about children that go into the community gardens and branches falling. And then also, as we heard from Mr. Anderson, there was concern about the excavation of the paving in proximity to the oak tree roots. As Mr. Harrison correctly stated, the oak tree roots are pretty deep. They go vertically down more so than spread horizontally. The History Center would prefer to remove that existing tree. Another tree to be removed is an existing apple tree that I'm pointing to. On the original landscape plan, we proposed to keep that apple tree. It's a 36-inch caliper, which is the diameter at breast height. So the proposal was to keep that, but also that's in close proximity to the new curbing for the parking area. Another tree to be removed is a Norway spruce tree that will be between the ingress driveway and the egress driveway. It's a 24-inch diameter Norway spruce tree. It's lost a lot of its lower branches. It was originally planted as a small evergreen tree. Aesthetically, it really doesn't belong in that location. And then the 4th tree to be removed will be a small dogwood tree that has an 8-inch caliper that, in my opinion, is not in great shape. So we're proposing 26 new trees for the property, proposing 90 new shrubs, along with 385 perennials and ground cover plants. On this plan, we're also proposing a dense planting of 15 American holly trees. So these are evergreen hollies to be planted at the southwest corner of the site. They'll be planted at a height of 7 to 8 feet tall at time of planting, and they can grow up to 15 to 30 feet tall, and usually they keep to 10 to 15 feet in width. We were proposing 4 red maples around the perimeter of the parking area, but we're now proposing to remove the existing apple tree, so we will be proposing 5 red maple trees. And the question is the existing oak tree, whether that gets replaced with a red maple tree or not. And then another thing that came up on the board engineer's comments were the proximity of the red maple trees to the curbing. These are just shown diagrammatically to be close to the edge of the parking lot. They would not be planted the way they're shown on that drawings. We would recommend that the trees be planted a minimum of 3 feet away from the curbing. Let's see, next slide. The next slide is an enlargement of this landscape plan. And on this plan and on this slide, you can see the plant schedule. And all of the plants that were selected are native to New Jersey. You'll see it on this slide and also on the next 2 slides. And in addition, the plants were selected to have year-round interest. So there's a great variety of spring, summer, and fall interest, and in addition to winter interest for the plant. The next slide shows some of the plants that were selected. The top left shows some of the evergreens that are selected specifically because they would work well on the site and they're native to New Jersey. We have inkberry shrubs that are low evergreens. We have mountain laurel shrubs that flower in June. The American hollies that I stated that would be planted at the southwest corner. Those are the evergreen trees that would form a dense screen along the property line. Bearberry, which is an evergreen that would be a ground cover in that island between the 2 driveways. And then there's a lot of deciduous trees that are proposed. I'm pointing to the red maple tree, which is a pretty fantastic tree. It develops nicely. It can grow 40 to 60 feet tall with a gray trunk, gray bark. Dogwood trees that would be in the center of that island, white flowering dogwoods. American yellowwood trees that would also be in the proximity of that entry drive. Eastern redbud trees, and also one serviceberry tree that would be at the rear of the Clark House. The next slide is our images of some of the deciduous plant material. The top left is New Jersey tea, which is a terrific native shrub, blooms in May and June. Summer sweet, another great native shrub, blooms in July and August. Sweet spire will be at the top of that island. We'll have plantings of golden tick seed, wild geranium, and also pasture rose. These are all plants selected not only because they're native, but they have an interesting time of flower. Next slide is the view of the Clark House. So the Clark House is the building as you face the property. It's on the right or the north side of the property. So the image on the left, the photograph on the left is the rear or the west side of the Clark House. The image on the right is the front or east side of the Clark House that faces Orange Road. So this building is on the northern side of the property. It was constructed in 1894, and as Angelica stated, it contains the administrative offices for the Montclair History Center, spaces for classes, and also all of their archives and their library. As you could see from this slide, especially at the rear, the one on the right's a little dark. You can see there's several steps up to the building, so anyone with disabilities has a very difficult time getting into this building. The next slide are the proposed drawings of the Clark House. So the proposal is to remove that existing rear porch and the small patio and replace it with a new barrier-free or ADA compliant ramp plus steps. So I'm pointing to that on the drawing. So the ramp is to be partially brick paving, and then it'll be a wood ramp up to a stoop or a landing. And then a small addition that's about 9 feet by 14 feet is proposed to contain a handicapped or barrier-free bathroom plus a small entry vestibule. The entire project, everything we're discussing, the accessibility projects are to be funded by the New Jersey Historic Trust. So as was asked before, the plans have been reviewed and analyzed many times by the New Jersey Trust for compliance with the Department of the Interior's guidelines for historic structures. And as was stated, this was one of the reasons why we had to skip the last meeting. We went back and forth with the New Jersey Historic Trust about everything to do with the ramp and the exterior siding, the windows and the door, and even some of the interior details going from the proposed little lobby into the building. There was a lot of discussion about the molding and the trim work, what it should look like. So they gave their seal of approval for this, and we're showing what's been approved. In addition to the approval for the plans and elevations, we also have a request from the trust for archaeological digs prior to any excavation happening on the site. So before the curbs are dug, before the foundation for this addition is dug, the New Jersey Historic Trust has requested archaeological digs to take place. This Clark House is one of 3 locally landmarked buildings on this property. So another one is the Nathaniel Crane House. So this is the Nathaniel Crane House. The image on the left is the front elevation, which faces east. The image on the right is the side or south elevation. This building was built in 1818. It's set back from and located to the southwest of the Clark House that I just described. This contains a gift shop for the museum. As you can see from these photographs, there are approximately 4 steps to get from the ground level to the first floor of this building, again, making it extremely difficult for anyone with disabilities to get into this building. The proposal for the Crane House is to create a new ADA-compliant ramp on the side, on that south side of the building. There's an existing door, but the proposal is to make that door wider, to make it a 3-foot wide door so it complies with the ADA or barrier-free requirements. We're also proposing a ramp that's a combination of brick at the bottom and then a wood as it goes up to that entry door. So we're proposing a new ramp and new steps to that south side entrance, and we're additionally proposing new railings at those existing front steps to match what's being done on this ramp. This project was also reviewed and approved by the New Jersey Historic Trust for conformance to the Secretary of Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties. Next slide is lighting. So in addition to the accessibility improvements that are proposed, we're also proposing lighting improvements to the site. So we've worked with a lighting consultant and selected these pole-mounted light fixtures that we feel are historically correct. So there'll be a total of 10 light fixtures as shown in yellow on this plan. So 10 12-foot tall pole light fixtures. There'll be 3 within that island between the 2 driveways, and then 7 around the perimeter of the proposed parking area. And then on this drawing are shown the foot candle levels as calculated by the lighting consultant to show how they comply with the township standards. Now, one other light that's proposed is a post-mounted light at the rear of the Clark House between the new ramp and the new steps, right at the rear entry door. And there'll be 2 wall-mounted sconces on the south elevation of the Crane House next to that new entry door. So that's the limit of what I am testifying about.
Paul, your office presented these plans to the Historic Preservation Commission also.
Yes.
I'd like you to just address, if you can, there's 5 comments in the HPC report. 2 are really just statements. If you could address numbers 1, 4, and 5.
Sure. Number 1 states that the applicant shall evaluate and explore alternative solutions for interior accessibility at the Clark House. And I'll just cut to the chase. What was shown to the Historic Commission is not what is shown here tonight. What's shown here tonight was analyzed and approved by New Jersey Historic Trust. So we've made changes to the proposal for the rear entry to the Clark House to be in compliance with New Jersey Historic Trust requirements and the Department of the Interior guidelines. What was the other one?
4 and 5.
Number 4, bricks of existing pathways should be salvaged and reused in crosswalks and new and rebuilt walkways. Yes, the plan is to salvage existing brick to reuse. Number 5 states that signage must return to the HPC minor applications committee for review and approval. There are no new signs proposed. There's a directory sign at the back of the Clark House that will be remounted next to the door. There's an existing sign on the Nathaniel Crane House, and that will remain where it is.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Harris, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Mr. Caulfield?
No questions.
Mr. Church? No questions. Mr. Ward?
No questions.
Mr. Vieira?
No questions.
The shrubs that are on the left side of the driveway going in, did you look at whether any of those should be retained? There's one rhododendron there that,
That could be relocated, yes. So that the plan is to make this new island between the two driveways very attractive. So that will have the 4 dogwood trees, the New Jersey tea underneath, and also the bearberry. So the proposal would be to relocate the rhododendron and any of the other shrubs that can be relocated. But rhododendron was good. The Norway spruce, we're not going to relocate.
no, I understand.
Okay.
That's no way that'll survive and
Right.
no reason for it to survive. The red maples, to go back to the engineer's review, you said you would plant them 3 feet away, but
At least.
over time, and not over very much time, their roots are going to go under the parking area, and I guess why not plant them somewhat further away?
We certainly could. As I said, they were shown diagrammatically on this plan incorrectly. They were shown right up against the curb, and they would never be planted like that. 3 feet's a minimum, but I agree, we could move it. We have room on both sides to move them 5 or 6 feet from the curb.
Okay, so your plans show the number of American holly that you're planting
Yes,
on the south side.
15.
Now, there are existing evergreens on the west side, I guess, more behind the Clark house or, in the space in between. Are those on this property or are those on the
They're-
neighbor's property?
They're on the adjoiner's property to the west.
And you're proposing new landscaping going along that boundary where, I'll say, there are existing gaps, is that correct?
Well, we're proposing the hollies where I'm pointing to. These are the existing evergreens on the neighbor's property. And then about the gaps you just asked? which-
So that you're showing, I think, some new plantings back there, maybe not. I guess not, okay. If you see, trying to visualize what I saw. There's one area, you're showing some existing trees, but I'm not sure what they are, but there's a gap in the evergreens that are on the neighbor's property. Do you see what I mean?
Right, well, the evergreens stop approximately there. And then there's a deciduous tree on the History Center property right there. When I surveyed this, I thought that wrote that the evergreens continue across the neighbor's property there.
But do you see, on your plans, there's the gap between on the evergreens on the neighbor's property, or maybe 2 neighbors' property?
Oh, we're in this area?
Yeah.
Yes, there's definitely a gap. There are like volunteer deciduous trees along the rear of the History Center property. And then nothing on the neighbor's property to the west.
Is there a need to provide screening, evergreen screening there, or do you think, I assume that you said volunteers, so I'll use it.
Yeah.
The trees there appear to be all volunteers that just grew up at the back of the
Right.
property. That,
I didn't think there was a need for evergreens on the History Center property there. And the community gardens, in my opinion, is pretty attractive. So there's nothing to screen there, in my opinion. So I did not see the need to call for evergreens in that area.
Any other questions from members of the board? Are there any members of the audience who have questions for this witness? Mr. Chairman, do you want to call your last witness?
Yes, Charles Height.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Charles Height, last name is spelled Heydt, and we have, our local office is 55 Lane Road, Fairfield, New Jersey.
Okay, Mr. Height, would you provide the board with the benefit of your educational background and your professional qualifications?
Yes, good evening, board members. I am a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. I've been practicing for approximately the past 12 years. I am also a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. That's the national certification. It's what keeps our credit maintenance going forward. I also do hold a master's in city and regional planning from Rutgers University, the Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy. And this is what I like to say my full-time night job. I do appear often before boards throughout the state, providing testimony in support of a whole slew of uses and types of variances or deviations.
And what is your professional affiliation?
With the application?
No, the firm you're...
Oh,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
the Director of Planning at Dresner Robin. Been there approximately about 7 years.
Okay. We'll offer him as a professional professional planner.
We accept him.
Thank you. Mr. Height, were you engaged by the Montclair History Center to provide testimony with regard to the zoning variances that we're seeking in this application?
Yes, I have.
Can you discuss the materials you reviewed and anything else you did in preparation for your testimony this evening?
Yes, in terms of my review of the materials, I did review all the plans and documentation that was submitted with the application. I did review the Montclair zoning ordinance and did have extensive conversations with the design team and the operator, Ms. Diggs.
Okay. You want to talk about, I don't think we need to talk about the project that's proposed, but why don't we talk about the zoning for the property?
Yeah, I will jump forward a little bit in my
Sure,
outline.
go
because
ahead.
I think the board has a good handle on the application and some of the characteristics of the site. We do have photos from my site visit that we prepared, but I'll reserve them if there's any questions. With respect to the variances, just moving in, we are in the R1 zone, which does refer to the RO mountainside zoning to establish what permitted uses are permitted in the R1 district. The reason we're here before this board is primarily because of the previously existing not permitted office uses on the second floor of the Clark House. So those, by virtue of not being permitted within the R1 district, require D1 use variance relief. We are also seeking 2 variances associated with the conditional use, the museum, with respect to parking and setback from parking areas. So that's the 2 types of relief. The latter 2, because the museum is a conditional use, we refer to them as a D3 conditional use variance.
Okay. You want to just proceed
Yeah,
and
I'll
give
just
your
proceed and-
analysis?
Yep. So this board may be familiar. D1 use variances, in my opinion, are either supported by what's termed an inherently beneficial use or a use that is particularly suitable for the proposed property. There has been case law throughout the state that doesn't necessarily classify independent offices as associated with an inherently beneficial use. The museum does have inherently beneficial characteristics through all of its nonprofits, operations and programs. But we're not here defending the museum use in terms of the D1 use variance. I would classify the request to this board about the office uses having to follow that second standard, the particular suitability test. And what I mean by that is, from case law, the Medici case, is that there needs to be very unique and particular aspects about this subject property that lend itself to accommodate and able to handle the proposed uses that are being submitted to the board. It also has an enhanced burden to deal with the negative criteria with respect to the zone plan and any detriment to the public welfare. In my course of my analysis, we did look at the operations, the proposed plans, to understand what particular attributes about the subject property there are. First and foremost, in terms of the physical nature, the two lots combined, lot 11 and 12, which will continue to operate in concert, are approximately 1.8 acres. That's substantially greater than the minimum for a museum use, which is 1 acre. And because of that, we are able to make these proposed modifications, which, in my opinion, do substantially improve the function of the overall site, not just with respect to the museum use, but also accommodating the office use. So we have the lot size as substantially larger than the minimum. We also have a substantial amount of frontage. A minimum in the R1 district with respect to museum uses is 38 feet. I can correct that. I had that. Let me just clarify that 1 second. Yes, I had a width of 38 feet. This subject property has 263 feet of frontage on a public right-of-way. I'll relate that with the proposed improvements for driveway access, which I think are some of the more significant in terms of accommodating the general welfare. Currently, the one lane of two-way traffic is not necessarily the most efficient and safe condition. This proposal separating the entry and exit does enhance efficiency as well as safety for any future people coming to the museum or the other uses on site. So again, that frontage does allow for the properties, the facades, the front yards to be maintained and accommodate this separated driveway. So that's a unique aspect to this site. The proposed improvements have been coordinated with respect to the scale and design of the existing facility. We just heard from the project architect in terms of the coordination with the State Historic Preservation Office and the trust. Those improvements do not increase the size of the existing office spaces, and what we clarified earlier, there are no plans to increase the size of the office spaces. I did want to just reiterate, by our discussions with the project team, these offices, and I'll just run through them. One office is 154 square feet, another is 216 square feet, 171 square feet, and 315 square feet. These are all small offices, and as we heard before, we're really underutilized rooms that have just been able to accommodate an additional source of funds for the museum. So they are small in nature, they're not being enhanced, and the overall improvements are really at heart in trying to keep with ADA accessibility as well as the historic nature of the facility. We did look at adjacent land uses in the area. Just to the north is at the corner of Orange and Plymouth is a medical office facility. That's the most commercial use in this neighborhood. Across the street, there is one residential home that does operate a daycare. And primarily everything else around and adjacent to the subject property are residential, which is reflective of the R1 and the RO zoning that's in the surrounding area. This is a very special use. It's a unique use, and it's an organic use, meaning that the integration of office spaces with the museum use does have a high level of synergy and accommodation on this subject property. What I often like to share with boards is some of the best uses, some of the most organic uses that you probably don't even know needed a use variance have occurred over time. But It's because of the type of zoning we have in place in New Jersey, meaning the Euclidean zoning, where we really try and separate zoning in each zone, nice perfect boxes. That really prevents opportunities to have a really nice gem with a high level of synergy between the various uses, such as this museum. What I'm getting at is the medical offices are subordinate. They're not the primary driver of the site. They won't be in the future. And I think one telling fact is that we aren't proposing signage for these offices. They're really customer-client relationship driven, appointment only. There's no external signage or attraction for any passerbys to come to this facility, the museum, to use any of the office uses. So I think that's telling. And what that means to me is that it's consistent with the existing museum use and doesn't create any sort of added intensity of the existing use and property.
Okay.
The last component that I wanted to speak to was about parking. So this is related both to the museum use as well as the office use. We do, in coordination with the project team and the museum, have understood that there's a high level of synergy between the uses, and in terms of shared parking, when you evaluate the peak hours and the occupation percentages of all the uses and combined, we have the museum use, we have the 4 office uses, you do actually find that the proposed parking spaces, the 16 spaces, does adequately supply enough parking for the existing museum as well as the office spaces. So in the peak time, which is typically on a weekday in terms of occupancy, we found that there's a total of approximately 14 typical spaces on an average day that are required to service the museum use. Obviously, the museum use has the greatest occupancy with the size of it, and that would require approximately 10 parking spaces. 3 of the offices typically, or 2 of the offices typically only require 1 parking space each. An accountant, the therapist is a virtual therapist. That's very unique. There's no patients that come there. And then the acupuncturist and the masseuse do have patients when they come, so those would be 2 spaces. So when you average out the occupancy of all those uses, you do wind up with 14 on a peak day, which is during the weekday. It's less on the weekends, because the office uses are typically not being occupied as on a normal basis. That is with respect to the both the use variance and supporting appropriate parking for the office uses, as well as with respect to the D3 parking space variance. We did review the calculations with the project team. When you add up all the square footages, I think the board's planner had approximately 250 spaces. When we went through our calculations, we had a conservative estimate of 289 spaces. It really is, the driving factor is the 1 space for 20 square feet for the museum use. I would love to see a day where a museum is occupied, where cars are needed to serve 1 car for 20 square feet. That means any 20 square foot space in the museum has a driver. That's not typical for this facility. It's a great ideal to reach, but I don't see there ever being a demand to need 289 spaces for the museum alone. So in terms of adequate supply of parking for the museum and the offices, the 16 spaces, and also including the 2 ADA spaces in that, which is 1 more than required, is an appropriate supply of parking for the museum use under the D3 test. So I think the site can still accommodate the museum use, notwithstanding the lack of required parking.
Want to talk about the other
The last.
D3 variance?
Yeah, that's the last one. Thank you for bearing with me if I'm long-winded or, I don't know, if trying to keep pace here.
Doing fine.
The last was picked up by the requirements of the museum as a conditional use. It's a setback to parking. This actually already exists. We're just defining it with the proposed improvements. It's on the south side of the property where there's a gap in distance. The minimum required is 10 feet. There's an existing distance of about 3 to 4 feet between where the drive aisle reaches the garage. The adjacent property owner in that area, the adjacent property owner in that area actually for probably 8 or 10 feet of length has a detached garage structure along that boundary that serves as substantial buffer to their single-family house. And there is a fence there that has been maintained over the years. In fact, there has been even vegetation that has created some sort of a natural buffer. That's been removed by the both parties along the property boundaries. So I think it's just mutually understood that because of the limited space and the understanding that the museum has existed for quite some time, that that condition will just remain without buffering or the distance required. So again, the site functions in terms of the driveway access for the garage, and the lack of screening is not a considerable impact for the museum to continue being utilized on this property.
Do you want to just briefly touch on the legal requirements for a D3 variance and why, in your opinion, this application meets those requirements?
A little different than the D1. There's the presumption of a permitted use with conditional uses, meaning that the governing body has reviewed a particular use, in this case museum uses, and said that you're permitted in accordance with conditions of either site design or operation. And that's exactly what you have in this conditional use set. The technical framing for a D3 use variance is, can the site still accommodate the use notwithstanding the variance requested? In both these instances, I do submit that the parking variance as well as the distance, the setback of drive aisle and the buffering, the site can still accommodate the museum use. The proposed improvements alone present positive improvements and enhancements to the museum in terms of operations and functions. Overall, this application, in my opinion, does make the museum use even more suitable for this subject property.
And do you want to briefly discuss the negative criteria for the 3 variances?
Yes, and I will try to stay brief. With respect to the negative criteria, the first prong, no substantial detriment to the general welfare. The plans are very detailed and extensive with respect to the improvements. The driveway improvements, the parking improvements, the stormwater management upgrades. I did confirm with respect to the landscaping plan that the volunteer landscapers and gardeners at the facilities will not be in charge of implementing all the improvements. I say that facetiously because there's a lot of improvements by way of landscaping, not only aesthetics, but trees do enhance stormwater capabilities of the natural terrain. So there's those improvements as well. I do think the improvements to the driveway access are probably, in my view, the greatest improvement to prevent any sort of safety issues with a one-lane, two-way traffic. I mean, that's I said that at the beginning. We are increasing the number of parking spaces over existing conditions where we heard, and based on my site visits, it's not a very regulated parking area. What's being proposed is a very well-defined, very operable parking area. With respect to the second prong of the negative criteria, no substantial impairment to the zone plan or zoning ordinance. The conditional use is less of a burden in terms of the D3 conditional use variances because the museum use is already accepted as a permitted use in this zone, albeit meeting conditions. So that's not the focus. The focus would be is there a substantial impairment of the zone plan introducing the office uses. Given the fact that these office uses have existed for quite some time and have not generated any impacts in terms of off-street parking issues, there could be fire issues or occupancy issues with other types of uses, but the very nature of office, in my opinion, is appropriate. It has a high level of synergy. The small office footprints do, by sheer size, reduce the ability for people as well as cars to be needed to be supported on the site. I do recognize it's a residential zone. I don't think offices would be appropriate as a standalone office in this zone, but given that they're occupying existing space within the existing structure, I don't believe there's impairment of the zone plan. In other words, in terms of best planning practices, I think this is an efficient use of space. That's a purpose of planning. So I think that's a special reason the board can consider in terms of the positive criteria as well as offsetting the negative criteria. There are also other purposes of planning with respect to purpose I, the creation of a desirable visual environment through good civic design. It's been a privilege to review and catch up. I know these plans have been in process for more than a year, but to review and understand these plans, because this is an extensive upgrade and does further that purpose as well.
Okay,
That's all I have.
that's all we need. Thank you.
Okay.
No further
Ms.
questions.
Harris, do you have any questions?
Yes, and I don't know who's best to answer this, but I know the previous witness, the engineer, stated that the conditions requested by the engineer, except for, I think it was 13, were acceptable. I just wanted to make sure that included lot consolidation as well. Is that what's?
We're okay merging the two lots.
Okay.
Yes.
And then in terms of the buffer at the south property line by the garage, is there any reason why we can't add one to that exposed area?
I think it was discussed and it's just not preferred by either adjoining property owner.
Thank you.
Alan, quick question. On the merging of the lots, is that something that the tax assessor can just do, or do they have to go through a subdivision and
No, we
submit a
can
map
just,
and stuff like that?
It's a simple process. We just file a consolidation deed in the county,
Okay,
and that
okay.
merges the lots together.
And that merges, so you don't have to go through a subdivision and map and all this?
Don't
okay.
need any
Okay.
approvals, and, of course, there's not going to be any impact on
Gotcha.
the tax assessor's office since the
Yeah, and
properties are
wouldn't want them to
tax
bear the
exempt.
expense of that.
Right.
I've experienced this property. My daughter had gone to farm camp there for 2 years, and I've got a chance to know the property and understand the parking, and, and I noted that there was a need for change, and, and that was a good thing, and also kind of like could be a bad thing in the end in some ways. Like, there was one driveway, you had to take your turn, you had to come in and out, you wouldn't want to go in the driveway half the time, you want to park on the street and walk your way up there and stuff like that. But now it's going to be a little bit different. We will have a better, driveway access in and out. That means, it might be more cars going into that location and then more cars coming out. Another thing for me was like, and I didn't know that they had offices there and stuff like that. Plus, there are also employers there that might have their cars there too. Because when in farm camp, there would at least be 3 or 4 employers there that would manage the camp as well. So there was always some parking when you got in there that made it somewhat chaotic. I'm just not sure how going forward with the new system and the new parking, like how that all is going to work itself out in some way. I've noticed that when you go in to go to camp, get your kid to come back out, I mean, there might be a line, people might be taking a left on Orange Road. It might be, you know, backed up traffic just to get the cars out of that. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but it can, you know, Orange Road can be, if you wanted to make a left from there, it could be a slightly difficult aspect. I'm just going to throw a bunch of things out, and then you can answer as you go. I mean, obviously, if we use the concept of buses coming in for like a high school or an elementary school, I mean, there's no way they can go through the driveway. They probably have to park on the street, which is perfectly fine. I would think, like, in some sense, like the parking authority should be thought about using this, because like people do park on the street and they might park closer to the driveway entrances, and there needs to be some aspect of like working some better solutions out for that, because Orange Road is a slightly difficult street to get there. But in the long run, I think this is needed, and I see the need of it. So I just want to just give you my interpretations, because I've used the property, I've been on the property, I've seen it firsthand, and that. Thank you.
Mr. Caulfield, everything you just alluded to is 100% accurate and reasonable in terms of interest in your experience. In terms of parking, we are increasing the usable parking spaces without a substantial increase in terms of square footage or intensity of the property. The physical increases are 25 square feet to accommodate the ADA accessible bathroom, but the existence of the offices, whether they were offices or museum, the museum use would actually drive up the parking requirement more so. We're talking about one space per 20 square feet versus one space per 250, 150 square feet. So I do think that in totality, the improvements, notwithstanding the office uses, are improving the overall provision of parking on the site. With respect to the on-street parking, I do think there's a good point about site distance triangle when you're exiting the driveway. I would imagine that could be easily accommodated and coordinated with an appropriate no parking to driveway signage, or sometimes they use yellow paint along the curb to indicate a no parking area. That sort of suggestion could be addressed with that in terms of increasing the safety. As far as trips out in terms of queuing, typically if a vehicle is in a parking area and they can't enter the drive aisle, they wait in the parking space until there's space to move. The nice part about this design is that the queuing on the exit is going to be in its own lane, and there we can get the distance, but I would imagine because of the distance of the driveway, there's at least 1 to 2 spaces, maybe even 3 spaces of queuing in the driveway alone. So that does help offset the impact in terms of that peak 5 minutes, if you will, if it's a pickup hour, or half hour. I'm expanding it to that. But I think that there's a sufficient amount of queuing on both the entrance as well as the exit to allow for the parking area to function. And then as far as bus circulation, that was one aspect I don't know if we addressed. I'd have to defer.
I'm sure they'd use the street.
Yeah, that seems reasonable because of the size of the parking area. Any turning templates would probably not
I
function.
understand that.
So,
yeah, I think a good working with the town's parking authority might be a good aspect to that. Thanks.
thank you.
Mr. Church?
I was just a little surprised at the use of the museum facility for commercial office space. I understand that what's there now is office space limited to single practitioners. A chiropractor,
Therapist, acupuncturist,
acupuncturist and so
filmmaker.
forth. I would like to make sure that is put in. That's going to. I'm going to recommend that be maintained and not expanded. In your experience with this type of structure, has that ever happened before where it's not even within the realm of the Historical Society's function? It's a commercial use strictly.
Yeah. So in urban environments and in unique locations, there always exists the opportunity for multiple independent uses to occur, and that's basically why I am hired to get involved in use applications in a mixed-use setting. I agree with the limiting of the conditions on the square footage. I am not aware of any plans to increase the amount of office space on this facility. What I referenced earlier in testimony was the size of these offices, one, limits the intensity, and the programming and operations of the museum is still the very clear predominant use of the site.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Mr. Moore?
No questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Viera?
No questions.
Would, I guess on the parking, and, you're making the situation better, but the office space, taking the view that the two currently are solo with no one coming in, the other two just have one client at a time, that's still 6 of 16 spaces that, what would be your view if the use didn't exist now and the application was to establish the office use on the property, increasing? I understand if office space less need than the museum, but the museum calculation is silly, so I'm not sure I can really address that. But if they were coming in new to establish office space, would your testimony be the same?
So, yes, and that's actually how I approached this application. When we do have existing uses, it's actually helpful because you can understand why those existing uses have a high level of synergy, and how we relate that to typical planning conditions or regulations to regulate a proposed use moving forward. So one, again, the square footages of these units are so small that any future office that would occupy it in that permitted office category would be limited by the size. So maintaining those size, not increasing them, not combining them is an important aspect. The other is the very nature of these uses being predominantly unadvertised and by appointment does help reduce the amount of foot traffic that is not planned. So I think that would be something appropriate that you could look at. At the same time, you don't want to overregulate uses with hours of operations or limited parking or whatnot, because if you give only one space to each of those uses, you're going to rule out potentially someone who does have a client come or whatnot. So it's a balance, but I do think in terms of that shared parking assessment, the peak occupancy is lower and low enough to not warrant more parking than the proposed 16 spaces. So it's 6 of 10, but on a typical hour, they're off-peak hours that the office spaces are operating compared to the museum use.
Any other questions from members of the board? Any members of the audience with questions for this witness? And then are there any members of the audience who have any testimony, comments, anything you want to say about the application? Yes, please come forward.
About overall or just him?
Yeah,
No,
first of all-
overall.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do. My name.
And your name and address, please.
My name is Timothy Manning. Press the button. Start over.
You don't see any reason.
I swear to tell the truth.
My name is Timothy Mannion, and I live at 129 Union Street, which is the property immediately to the south, adjacent to the Historic Center property. So I own that garage that is right next door, that is not far enough away from the parking area. There has never been a problem with that space being used. Nobody ever drives a car that far. Now that it's improved, perhaps they might, but they would only be dropping off and picking up supplies in that garage. So as a neighbor of 24 years next to the History Center, I can tell you, and also as the owner of the person who donated the land to that property when that History Center was established, was a prior resident of my house, I feel an affinity for the History Center, being its closest neighbor on that side, and also as sort of the successor of the donor of the land on which it sits. So I'm very happy to support this application in all of its aspects, and in this also to support the continued commercial rental spaces, because it is very innocuous. I have hardly ever even noticed any more cars there than would be there on any other day of usage. And in fact, one of those people was a resident in my house for a while who rented a room from us, and is one of the people who leases one of those offices, and is one of the nicest people that you'd ever want to meet. And if you need a massage, she's the guy to go see. So I just want to say that the plantings that are proposed are very good. We have on, that map is not up any longer, but there was, at the end of that parking area that's in question, there are no plantings shown because there really isn't quite enough space to put anything before you get to our fence. But on the other side of our fence, we have 5 very large now arbor vitae that shield that whole section from our view. So it is not a concern for us to have that parking area that close. We can't see into it at all anyway. What else? That's it. Oh, when I first moved into that house 24 years ago, there were 2 driveways side by side. And at some point, it was paved over with grass. So it would be just restoring the prior use that was existing. I don't think it even needs a variance. I think they just need to pave it because the curbing is there. Just because it was paved over doesn't mean it isn't still a driveway. So when they put in that addition for the crane house to get into the basement level for programs, that's when they sort of took away that driveway after that project was completed. So it's still there. If you check, there's probably zoning that says that second driveway is already an approved use because that was an original separate property. And just to fill in the History Center completely, my driveway off of Union Street comes around and curves in front of our garage, and under the side of our garage, there is a section of pavement still and curbing that connects to the curbing that's in front of their garage and continues along to the exit. So there's concrete curbing about 4 inches wide that's continuous from my property into that property. So there was a driveway there, and it ran along the whole back of that when it was one big humongous property way back when. That's all I got to say. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Any questions for me?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Trembulac, we're at 5, since Mr. Moore arrived slightly after testimony began. Do you want to proceed? We could.
We're going to proceed, Mr. Chairman, and let
Okay,
the
you want
board
to?
vote on
Yeah,
that.
okay, first, are there any other members of the public who have any comments, testimony on the application? Okay, Mr. Trembulac, you want to sum up?
Yeah, and I think I just want to talk a little bit about the office use. We're talking about a very small office space, a total of 856 square feet total. The largest of the 4 offices is 315 feet. Square feet, the smallest is 154 square feet. We certainly have no intention to expand that, and the conditions that you articulated early on, Mr. Chairman, are certainly acceptable. We would not modify that space in any way. We would not increase it in any way. If you want to impose other limitations, number of employees, et cetera, we're certainly amenable to that. The uses, have existed in this fashion for a very long time with apparently no issues, no impact, as noted by the neighbor, pretty innocuous. Of course, the building is office space. It's used for administrative offices of the staff, and it's still an office use, although, which, if it was occupied by staff, we would not need the variance, but we obviously need a variance because they're being rented out to, unrelated third parties. But it's still an office use, and we're talking about a very large site. It's in a residential zone, but it's much bigger than any other residential property. It's really not a residential use. It's a museum use. This property can certainly accommodate the use, as it has for many years. And, we think it would be appropriate to approve that variance, subject to the conditions that I just mentioned. I mean, the rest of the application, we're adding more parking, even though we don't meet the requirements of the ordinance in terms of parking. We're adding more parking than currently exists, even though we're not creating any need for more parking. And we're going to have parking that actually looks like parking spaces with stripes and porous pavement, et cetera. One of the many conditions, one of the many obvious improvements of this application, which speak for themselves in terms of accessibility and safety, and dramatic improvement to the site in general. So we think this is a good application. We hope the board agrees and would approve the application along with the variances and subject to the conditions that we've discussed throughout the hearing. So, thank you.
Start discussion, Ms. Harris?
I'm definitely in favor of the site improvements. I think the expanded parking and the paving will definitely make the site safer for visitors. And I think I'm okay with the office use as long as we put the condition on the approval that it cannot be expanded in the future and is limited to the office space that exists today.
I think that you've been good neighbors. You've not taken advantage of the office space by making them bigger and stuff like that. And, I feel like I need you to honor that going forward and being a good, bringing the goodness to the community, which you guys are doing. So I am in favor of this project. I'm in favor of what the offices are there right now. I understand their use for you guys. I understand that. So I'm in favor.
I'm in favor of the application with any restrictions that the board feels has to be made. But overall, it's a good application, and I think it's an improvement to the property. So I'd be in favor of this application as presented.
Mr. Morgan's comment, even though you can't vote.
I'm in favor of the application. I think it'll be a nice enhancement to this historic site.
I'm also in favor of the application. I think it's a good enhancement, the parking lot, the entrance, stormwater management, the plans, and obviously universal design, accessibility and safety. That's great. Thank you.
I'm also in favor of the application. I actually thank the member of the public. I was wondered about that curbing that ran through the parking area that had no visible explanation as to its existence. I think, let's go through this. One, the improvements to the property, will vastly improve it. It'll make it a much more attractive property. I think, the driveway condition currently is, and I have no idea why they eliminated the second driveway. It's unsafe. I went to pick up my herbs, as I do every year, and I had a medical issue, so I didn't want to carry anything great distances, so I foolishly drove up, and there were two of us driving up, and there were two driving out, and there was another car trying to back out to go out, but it couldn't because the cars going out were there, and we did a little dance and got it straightened out, but I said, never again will I drive up, at least until the second. And I think as the property has gotten more uses in terms of the community garden, and hopefully with these improvements, it'll get more use. that'll be great. You're increasing the number of parking spaces. And Tommy, if you could just make a note for our next annual report, we should comment on the 20 square foot parking space, because that's pretty crowded and is assuming every single human being there is going to be driving there in their own car, which is kind of a silly assumption, so we should recommend that be changed. I think there'll be times when the parking is not going to be adequate, and, the parking on Orange Road is limited there, and I think adding the second drive probably actually knocks out a street part, will effectively knock out, and as Mr. Caulfield said, making the left turn out is difficult, and I tend to make the right turn out and go to the light and go wherever from there, because, but, that's not going to change. I've no issues with the conditional use variances and the other variances, the office use. Quite honestly, if this had come in and they were proposing to add unrelated offices, I would have had serious questions as to why we're doing that, and legally and technically it doesn't matter, but what they've established gives me a level of comfort, as I indicated when questioning the witness. It's not a question of who the tenants are today, but what they can become, and so let me go through the conditions. The office use shall be limited to the 4 spaces currently used for office use on the second floor of the Clark House. That there be no more than 4 offices, which I think is inherent in that there be no change, expansion of the existing space. It's limited to the current square footage, that no more than 2 persons be present in any office at any one time, which gives a variety of flexibility on how to do that, and that there be no waiting areas outside of the offices. That there be no new signage, because that deals with a whole number of issues, not just the offices. That the condition 4, the Historic Preservation Commission report, let me do the other, that any events, weddings, read in parentheses, but I don't want to be limited to people who have a direct affiliation with Montclair History Center, and that the trash enclosure conform to the ordinance, that the materials that are currently kept on the south side of the garage be removed, that the arborist, that an arborist be retained to check on the oak tree and make a recommendation as to whether it stays or goes. And I'm going to limit him in the sense of, some arborists look at trees and say it's old, and so let's get rid of it because it'll die eventually. I want to know if it's healthy now and if its root structure will survive the construction, not, oh gee, in another 20 years it'll be gone, so why keep it? That the red maples be located planted at least 6 feet from the parking area, and that we do conditions 3 through 12, 14 through 18, 20, and 23 through 25 of the engineer's report, and I have to make sure the ones I'm skipping I've otherwise addressed in my other comments. Okay. Yes. Okay. Any other discussion, comments from board members? If not, someone want to make a motion? No, but yes.
Timothy Mannion, 129 Union Street in Montclair. Question about your stipulation about no more than 2 people in an office at any given time. On what basis is that arrived at?
Because there's inadequate parking on the site, and we're giving a parking variance, and the testimony was there are either 1 or 2 people currently, and I don't want to add to the parking demand that's already.
So if a couple were to come for couples therapy with a therapist that was renting the office, they would have to arrive together in a car and have 3 people in the room? This is where I get a little bit fuzzy with stipulations. So that's my question for you to consider. Thank you.
Okay. Not opening the door further. Okay, so someone want to make a motion?
Motion to approve the application with the stipulations proposed by the chair.
Second.
Tommy, you want to call the roll, just since we're 5?
Mr. Harrison,
Yes?
Mr. Caulfield,
Yes.
Mr. Church,
Yes.
Ms. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Vieira.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to take a break until 10 of. If the Walnut Crescent application can get all set up and ready to go, well, the Montclair History Center is departing, and we'll be ready to move forward.
So you guys know I'm not stopping the recording for this recess, so don't speak into the microphones.
Yeah, just a couple of the photos and then that PDF. I don't know where you have them. So, you know.
Okay, we're ready to resume. If the Montclair History folks can finish leaving and the Walnut Crescent folks can take your seats. Tommy, we can run?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. The next application is that of William Moss. This is an application for a variance to convert a half-story to a full story on property located 56 Walnut Crescent. The property is in the R2 two-family zone district and is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 37 in Block 4308. The proposal requires a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-51 to allow a three-story principal structure where 2.5 stories is permitted. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Okay.
Do both raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes.
Yes.
State your names and addresses, please.
Nick Mandarakis, 561 Park Street, Montclair.
William Moss, 56 Walnut Crescent, Montclair.
And Mr. Mandarakis, you're a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Tell us what you're doing.
Okay, so this is, we can show you some photos of the existing property. It's an existing two-family house. It's a owner-occupied, technically Charles, it's a family home.
Yes.
And his wife lived there. There were 4 kids, recent newborn.
We have a baby who's going on 9 weeks right now.
So they occupy the second and third floor. The third floor was an existing attic space. There's an existing 1-bedroom. We recently, actually a permanent place, it's been approved, the construction started to renovate the attic space, to add another bedroom, bathroom, just bring it up to date and just make it more comfortable for your family, so just more livable space.
It was when we purchased the property, the third floor was actually what I think is referred to as a border space, where, because it was a legal two-family, but a boarder could live up there. Basically, I don't exactly understand what the denomination is, but it was.
As long as it wasn't a full kitchen, they could have, a microwave or,
Exactly. It's just a very basic unit, and we've taken out of the basic kitchen, and we're just making it bedroom spaces, basically, the third floor.
So that already has been submitted, it was approved, they started the construction on it, and then, I guess through the construction, you guys started thinking about it, and just based on the volume, they were looking at adding some dormers just to get some more light in there, a little more space, just more usable space to be able to tuck a bed into the 2 bedrooms. We looked at that, and it sparked having to go for a variance. So I can go over all the parameters. We're just over. There's 4 basically 4 items that we had to satisfy, and there's 1 that we don't comply with, and that's why we're here. So just to show you I can just flip through this time. So this is the front of the property. Really this is the. Yeah, sure. So we'll go to the west side. This is the back of the property. Okay. So this is the west side. So as you come down Walnut Crescent kind of curves around, and this is the most predominant view and where we're proposing the dormers. So the 2 dormers are proposed on the left and the right of the big volume in the middle, right past the. Let me go to the plan. Do you have the PDF, Tom? Is that a different, the drawing?
It's the second tab.
Oh, right here, okay. Okay. So, do you have this up there? You got a copy of it? Okay. So basically, so we're proposing these two dormers up here, two small dormers. There would be, there's a bedroom up front and a bedroom in the, or a bedroom in the back and a bedroom in the front. So those red areas there, those are the two dormers. So if you go through the 4 parameters, I'm gonna start with number 4. The adjacent front yard setback, we basically, you had to take the average property lines to establish from the front yard to where that dormer could where that volume could not exceed. So if you look at the bottom left, adjacent property setbacks, it's the average property distances, 3 houses to the left and the 2 houses to the right. That's excluding 56 Crescent, the subject property. And can you hear me, or this is gotta push it over. So taking all those averages with the setback, there's a datum line that you strike across the front of the property, and that complies. So that front dormer that's proposed is within that distance, so we're okay there. The third, number 3, property survey setbacks, the required setback to the left and to the right, 6 foot on the left, 10 foot on either side of the property line. That also complies. We have 7.3 on the left and 12.5 on the right. So we're good there as well. The second one is the Montclair zoning section. It's 347-223D. It's the height expectations or exceptions. So that's the overall facade, and that also complies. We're proposing the 2 dormers. The one towards the one on the rear is about a 9-foot wide exterior. The one on the front is about a 7-foot wide exterior. This is also based on where we can fit it within the existing space that was already started to be built and designed. So all those 3 elements comply. So the one where we're missing the boat is the first one. So that's the 1.5-story section, Montclair zoning section 347-2. And I can read it to you. You're probably familiar with it, but it's basically that 40% rule of the footprint, which really translates to a 60% rule, as I understood it, talking to the zoning department. So when you calculate that, it's a datum line at 5 foot across the whole plane of the space. So the plan that I have there, the attic floor plan, this is a section cut at 5 foot. So that's anything within 5 feet, and that's where we got these calculations. So the red hatched area, the front dormer, we're proposing an additional 32 square feet. The rear dormer, it's an additional 40 square feet. If we go through the calcs, we have existing footprint. At the 60% rule, I have 761 allowable. The area at 5 foot is 796 square feet. With the proposed dormers, an additional 72, we're at 868 square feet. So we're not complying. We're over by 107 square feet. So that's really the only item out of the all 4 that don't comply that sparked the requirement for the variance.
Any questions from members of the board? Ms. Harris?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So everything that you have hatched on this attic plan has a ceiling height above 60 inches?
The ceiling height is the living space is above 60 inches. It'll be we still have to meet so it's construction and zoning. So from a construction perspective, it's the FAR
and the floor area ratio and anything above what's considered usable space, right? So that's anything over 84 inches, over the 7 foot. This is strictly speaking to zoning. So zoning considers anything at that 60-inch plane part of anything that'll, how do I explain it? It's a section cut at 5 foot through that whole section. So that's what had to be considered in the calculations.
No, we understand. I think Ms. Harris's question is the entire area you're showing meeting the 5 feet? Or is there some area that's less than 5 feet?
There's areas like at the perimeter, like all around the perimeter, it's an attic essentially. So if we look at like the west elevation, top left.
So basically anything outside of the kind of faint red line is below 5 feet.
Yeah, like beyond if you look at the front dormer, that outside that front hatched area just to the left of there, it's crawl space, it's attic space. It's less than 5 feet. Same thing with like the top right, the gable comes down, so it's less than 5 feet. So we're looking at the livable height at the 60-inch plane that cuts all the way across.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
There's a little dashed red line, very faint. I mean, just to be clear.
We were just clarifying what
yeah.
that line was.
Exactly.
Yeah,
just to be clear.
I can show you.
because
You want me to show you?
No, we understand.
Okay, no problem.
We're there.
Yeah, we get it. Yeah.
Here's the actual footprint of the livable space.
Thank you.
So this is attic, this is,
Okay, thank you.
the gable end comes right down.
And then what determined the width of the dormer? In the bedroom in the rear of the space, it looks like the dormer is like wider than the walls. So what determined?
The width was based on the bedrooms that were planned. So where we could fit it, if we look at the rear one, which is on the top side of the plan, you got a set of stairs right there that come up. You had existing closets that were planned and built out, and so it's really to conform with the existing bedroom that was there, and then same thing with the front. The front is twofold. The front was to conform with the property setback, that front setback line, and also to fall within the bedroom. Framing as well. If you look at the roof line, like if you look at the 3D image and you see the roof line, that 3D image to the center left of the page, where you see where the roof line falls, it's where the dormer can actually be built based on existing framing, because it's all an existing roof other than adding those dormers. So there really was only a certain area that we could put them, and we wanted to make them look appropriate to the house without.
Okay. I guess my question is why weren't they the same width? Like why is one side of it?
They couldn't be the same width. So the front door, well, they could, but the rear dormer, the one to the left, if you look at the south elevation, the one to the left would be. The roof back there is slightly wider. Like if you look, so it's proportional to the plane of the roof.
Thank you.
You know, and the front one couldn't be any wider based on, like I said, framing and just the nature of the bedroom and how it was planned.
Mr. Caulfield.
How many bedrooms does the house have with this new?
This is up here. You have 3. Your second floor.
On the second floor, there are 2 bedrooms, but those will eventually be used for living space. One will be an office space, and one will be just a playroom, basically.
to the top floor, is that what you're saying?
Yes, our plan, well, the kids are still very young. We have a 9-week-old, a 2-year-old, and then a 6 and an 8-year-old, and we feel most comfortable for us all to be on the same floor, and we don't want to be separated from the kids with a stairway. So even though there are 2 potential bedrooms on the 2nd floor, we're going to try to make those living spaces and have all the bedrooms on the 3rd floor, and that's one reason we needed additional space. And the dormers do add some space, but the truth is that what they add more than space is they add light, because being in an attic space and because of the position of the house to the sun, rising and setting sun, that it does not get much light coming in, and by putting dormers on this side of the house, it means that we get quite a bit of sunlight coming in into the attic space, which could potentially be quite dark.
Gotcha. Is this a two-family house?
Yes, sir. It is a 2-family house. The 1st floor is a rental apartment, but my parents are also thinking of moving into the 1st floor.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Church?
No question.
Mr. Moore?
No questions.
Mr. Vieira?
No questions.
Okay, I don't have any questions. Are there any members of the audience who have questions? Or if you have any comments or statements about the application, anything you want to say about it, this is your time to come forward and say it. Anything either of you want to add before we discuss and vote on the application?
I think we're good.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Caulfield.
I'm in favor. You explained very well what's going on there, and good luck with everything with the whole family. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Church?
Yeah, I have no problems with this application.
Mr. Moore?
I'm in favor of the application.
Mr. Vieira?
I'm also in favor of the application.
Ms. Harris?
I'm in favor.
I'm also in favor. I think this is a minor deviation. Tommy, you should add this provision is, I'm somewhat intrigued. I mean, this is the first time we've had it where the dormer condition, the width of the dormer has been met, but the interior space, and then why the 5 feet, and it's good for his young children at the moment, but for him, I'd say not so good. I'm not sure, maybe it's appropriate, it's the first time we've had one where they met the dormer width and not the interior space calculation. But I'm in favor, I think, this is, fitting in with what the appearance was desired in terms of the dormer limitation. I think it's attractive improvement. It's not going to result in a substantial detriment to the public good or a substantial impairment to the zone plan. Someone want to move approval?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Go Bill.
Thank you very much.
Go home and enjoy your baby.
All night long.
But you're probably got a break tonight. It's, oh, gee, I have to stay here for 3 hours. Oh.
My wife was going to come, but I'm glad she didn't. Our babysitter would be wondering, where are you?
Okay, the next application is that of Garrett Yebernetsky. This is an application for variance to construct a rear addition to property located at 114 South Mountain Avenue. Property is in the ROA one-family zone, is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 15.12 and Block 204. The proposal requires a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-39C to allow a rear yard setback to the principal structure of 25 feet where 45 feet is required. The proposal requires a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-39D to allow a principal building coverage of 20.2% where a maximum of 20% is permitted.
Are taxes paid?
Oh,
Yes.
Notice, correct?
Yes.
notice in order.
Would you both raise your right hands? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes, I do.
State your names and addresses, please.
Garrett, Yebernetsky, and I reside at 114 South Mountain Avenue here in Montclair.
Brian, excuse me, Brian Adams. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm not pressing the button.
Turn-
That's better, yes.
You don't have to hold it.
Yeah, I got my finger on it now.
You don't
yeah.
have to hold
Oh, we don't have to hold it. Oh, I'm starting off bad. It's Brian Adams from New Jersey Sunrooms and Additions. Do you want my home address? Because I live in Florida, but I split my time between here and Florida.
Just give me one of them.
Oh, okay, fair enough. It's 1199 Route 22 in Mountainside.
Thank you. You can proceed.
Do you want to sort of, Garrett?
I don't know where to even begin.
Let me just explain something. I'm with a company that's going to do the, hopefully do the conservatory for Mr. Yebernetsky. Obviously, Mr. Yebernetsky is the one that's done the application. But if you want me to speak first, or Mr.
I prefer if you do.
Oh, is that okay with the board? Yeah.
Thank you.
We've been working very hard with Mr. Yebernetsky to get his dream of having a conservatory with a glass roof to enhance his outdoor living aspect, because he has a yard, a patio out there that is only used some of the year, and is a great orchid grower. He hopes to maintain doing that in there. It's a glass roof. That's why we call it a conservatory. As like other than some of the other rooms that we do with solid roofs, they're the sunrooms with the solid roofs. Mr. Yebernetsky wanted that open aspect, and the glass roof. As far as the variances go, we got the rear yard one is the main one. The coverage is 0.2% over, which I feel is a very small amount to be over. So hopefully you'll look favourably on that 0.2% of the coverage. We're speaking with Tommy, I believe it is, in the zoning department. We amended the property survey to show that Mr. Yebernetsky is giving up part of the driveway, converting it into a grassed area, so it will be a net reduction in the impervious coverage, although that isn't coming up today. That's one way that we got over that, so that we didn't have to go for that impervious coverage calculation. Now the main one is the 25-foot dimension to the property line on the rear yard setback. Mr. Yebernetsky's property at the back there, it's a tiered, and it rises quite sharply, but it's tiered back to the next property. So it's, and the house is set quite a way back from that tiering, and doesn't really overlook it. It's like in a valley, if you like, where the sunroom's going to go. And the majority of the sunroom is on the existing building line. It only projects from the building line by 66 inches, I think. So the majority of it is in line with the existing building. So that's about it. Hopefully I've covered it enough for you.
Now, I'd like to say, too, I mean, it's a particularly bizarre plot of land where they built this house. And it's a one-story house, and then you have a permeable ground or whatever, which we want to build the conservatory, leaving an area that you could walk through. Then there's a wall. Then there's another like 8 feet of property, and then there's another wall dividing my property with the up the hills property or whatever, which is owned by the city. So I mean, right now it's a deer path. So no one can even see what I'm going to be doing from anywhere. But I'd like to take advantage of what much space, usable space, that I can get out of it. So by doing this, and even though I'm encroaching 60 inches or whatever into it, it's making it a much more usable space.
Will the conservatory be conditioned?
I'm sorry.
Will it be conditioned? Will you have?
Yes, it
heat
will
and
be,
air?
yes,
Okay.
yes. And it comes under the, it does, it covers all the requirements to be conditioned, yes.
Okay. And what is happening with the fireplace?
That's going to stay in place, obviously it has to. We're it's going to be, we have a special box gutter system that's going to, like a trough, if you like, and it's going to wrap around all that. I've designed it so it goes all the way around it, and it will contain the water from the overspill from the existing roof, and it will channel it all the way down into the downspouts.
And then, is there a door to the right of if you're standing and looking at the back of the house, is there an existing door to
The
the
door
right
to
of
the
fire-
existing house?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to remain in. It's like a little well back there. So, as you've seen what we've drawn in, sort of a little U-shaped part. The door sits to the back of that, that
In
leads
fact-
into the house.
In fact, a new door was just installed there 3 days ago. So now it's a insulated door outside of what was put in, replacing what was put in 1977.
But the other, it's going to be, there will be a physical barrier that will remain between the two, between the sunroom and the existing house.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the conservatory be below the eaves of the building? Like, how does that fit in on that corner there?
Well, I just explained that the box gutter, it pitches down on all four sides.
Okay, yep.
And then the trough, or box gutter, as we
Yeah,
call
yeah.
it, that goes, when we explained about going round, as it go around the chimney, we design it so it all wraps around there.
Okay.
It's all made in our factory and assembled on site. Well, everything's made in our factory.
Gotcha.
And we assemble it on site.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe a silly question, but what's the strength of this type of observatory? You know,
Strength?
Sure, in terms of.
I've just finished one at a golf course in down in South Jersey. The main part that I designed there was 50 feet by 70 feet. And I did an octagonal bit coming off of that, which was 30 by 30. So these are all very, very well engineered. I've been, since I came to America in '94, I've probably designed 5,000 rooms similar to this or more. So we just do small ones, we do large ones. Everything is engineered, to cover all those snow loads.
This is a glass.
Glass,
roof?
yes. And there's all tempered glass, safety glass.
How many pounds can it handle?
I'm sorry?
The pounds. What's the weight that it can handle? For pressure.
What the weight of the product or the weight,
The glass, right? Like if you
I don't have those calculations with me, but it's all done to withstand up to 40 pounds per square foot. We're at 30 to 35, so it's well above the required snow loading. But the actual, I'm sorry, I don't have that weight factor with me at the moment, but
And the runoff.
I do apologise about that. I
And
didn't even think
okay.
that would be.
And it's engineered to code so that the snow.
Oh yeah,
will stay.
absolutely. I mean, I've been before the board before for another project. I've done lots of work in this area, Montclair. One of my first jobs before I decided to move here in '93 was in Montclair. One of the first ones. That's why I was brought over to America, because I specialised in it. So I've done a lot of work in Montclair, and the building department have always approved them. They never come up, because all the specifications for the roof go with it, the application.
You would have specifications that would go with the
Oh
application?
yeah. There's charts that go with it. There's absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's a separate thing. I mean, they will obviously look at things like that from the building point of view, yeah.
Just thinking about safety.
Mr. Vieira?
As far as the footing, I guess what the drawing shows, it's 18-inch wide continuous footing. Is that?
Can I just refer to that one? Can you repeat that, please, sir?
Yeah.
I'm a little bit hard of hearing, so...
Page, I guess, sheet A4.
A4?
A4. The footing.
Just 1 second. I've got two A4. I've got A4B, A4C. They're all retaining to the thing. Are you referring to this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
This one? 1 minute. 1 second here.
Or detail A5 too. Does that make sense?
A4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that. It was hiding away under there. What was the question?
So my question is that a standard width of the footing, or you calculated that based on the
standard width?
The standard width.
That's all to code and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as it's 36. Because a lot of people just put a low-level trench wall. We completely fill the trench up. We found it structurally better. Because some people do that and they build it up with smaller blocks. We do the whole trench in concrete.
Yep. And the roof, is it mechanically fastened, or how I'm talking
it's been mechanically
for the wind
fastened,
uplift, basically.
Yeah, it's obviously it has what's called an eaves beam that goes around all the perimeter that sits on top of all the windows. Then it has structural down columns for the rigidity, and that's all as special attachment screws that holds that down. Then the roof rafters are attached again onto the eaves beam.
Okay. And the whole system gets assembly on site, or you bring the entire system in place?
It's all made in the factory. It's made up as a unit and broken down.
And it's
So
broken
it's all
down,
made.
assembled.
It doesn't come in one. It's too big for transportation.
Yep.
It's all erected in the factory, because that's where we make sure the glass is going to be the right size. It's disassembled, labelled up, packaged and sent. As with the windows, we don't do anything stock. We make to measure every window, every roof element that we do.
Yeah. And then when you bring it on site, then it comes in pieces, but you don't crane lift. Basically, you bring piece by piece.
Yeah, it's the most efficient way of doing it. So yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
How was the size determined? I'm doing two questions. One, which should be my larger question, but is my smaller one. I mean, normally we don't allow, significant sized new encroachments on the rear yard, but I'm having less of trouble with that than, Tommy, this is the new ordinance in terms of the impervious, or is this what? Okay, so this is our first exposure to the ordinance that was adopted, I guess, 2 months ago.
Well, there's no variance needed for that, so no, I guess not.
Okay, so the impervious.
They meet the requirements.
No, I mean the lot cover, the principal building coverage.
That's not new.
It's always been 20% in this zone?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so what led to the size as to and configuration? You're only going partially along that existing rear wall of the house. You're not going up to, you're removing the existing wall up to the pier, but you're not going out that far. I'm trying to understand what led to the shape and size you're doing.
It's not a very large conservatory, to be honest, and my boss was actually the one that met Mr. Yebernetsky to go over the sizing of it. it was decided that was a reasonable space for this conservatory. I wasn't partly with you and Peter.
But
to that, but
we came up to that conclusion because of the proportion of the house to the amount of visual space that was of the ground level before you got to the wall. That left enough room that it looked pleasing to the building. It allowed passage behind, and it didn't interfere with the next level or the level above that, for that matter.
Okay, but if you, I'm not changing the size of it, but if you extended it along the rear wall further, and so it didn't encroach as far into the rear yard, did you consider that? Why don't I start with that?
Yes, we did. And actually, the proportions of the room, I owned an interior design firm for 25 years. And I just recently retired. And the proportions of the room were just knocked way out of whack doing it that way. And also that would mean moving air conditioning units and generators and all of that. So we're bypassing that by keeping it within those parameters.
I'm not seeing anything like that along that rear wall where the chimney is.
Show it on here on, here's a, here. No, they're not showing it that way.
That's an air conditioning unit between the windows along the next.
On the, this is looking at the back of your house there.
Right.
As you can see here, the red lining is where it's going. Whereabouts are existing air conditioners?
Right there.
Yeah, but I think what the gentleman was saying, it was maybe coming this way a bit. That's coming up to that corner though. So you couldn't. Let's just make sure we're all on the same wavelength there. On the property survey, where it's hatched in there in red, where it says 58 feet to that corner, are you going that way?
No, I'm going in the where it says 50 feet. I'm going over in that direction.
Yes, I thought you meant going in that direction. That comes up to a corner point there.
And I wouldn't even go as far as the corner. I'm keeping you the same size, but not encroaching as far in the rear yard as you're proposing.
So going a bit wider than reducing depth.
Right, and it's not going to be quite square, but it's going to be a large rectangular space.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not having a square now because of the chimney anyway. It's,
But I do not want it to encroach upon the existing raised patio. So I don't want to go any further to the right, and if I go any further to the left, then I'm getting into where the air conditioning units are, and I just think it'll look weird.
But you're leaving a little bit of patio behind that wall that's really not going to be usable. I'm not encroaching on the main patio area at all.
Have you got that pier there for the retaining wall there?
There's a pier there, and then it steps down. We're gonna just eliminate that step down.
Yeah, well, that step down, is it in line with that corner of the house? Which that pier is in line with the corner of the house?
It's in line with the corner of the house.
Okay.
And
would
then you could have
the opening of the door, that step down, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Because there's a door there, a patio door, sliding door, and what you can't see, the elevation changes up at that point, so the door will be lower than the step up. So
I'm not taking you all the way to the corner of the house. You'll have an area, in front of where you have the leader coming down.
Yeah.
Let us just say, and I'm not sure of what that distance is, but let us say you have 3 feet, so you have a landing where you'd come out of the door of the room, and then you could go into the main patio area.
Yeah. If you look at this sheet A4 that was just reviewing, I haven't got that dimension up to the corner there. But the questioning of doing that, moving that, is that so, then to adjust the front, so
So you would
wider
not
and
encroach
shallower?
as far into the rear yard.
I'm sorry, I didn't
So
hear.
where it's got 180 inches there, 15 feet, so you're talking about reducing the 15 feet to, is that what you're saying?
Yes, let us just, to use numbers, and by not knowing the distance from where you're proposing it to that corner, I'm not sure, but say reduce the 15 to 12 and extend the 14 and whatever it is to 17 and whatever.
Yeah, no, I fully understand what you're saying, but with that chimney that sticks out so big into the room, that's going to be a really obtrusive into if you reduce that too much.
No, but you're going to have, what, the chimney sticks out 2 feet?
Sorry?
This chimney sticks out 2 feet?
At least.
Yes, at least. It's about 30 inches, I think.
Okay, so you're still going to have 10 feet between that and, the rear wall.
Which means my furniture won't fit, including a couple antique pieces that I plan on putting in there.
It's very, the depth of that is very, very small, so, I understand what you're saying about moving it to the left. I'm with you, there could be some way of working that, but it's a big loss of the depth there. And 15 feet isn't on its own, isn't a big depth for a conservatory or an addition of some sort.
Any other questions from members of the board?
Are you planning to have gutters along the
Yes.
perimeter of this? Okay. And the leaders are shown on your elevations?
They're not shown on there, no. We find out the best place after it's put up to put them. Because the gutters that go on around the perimeter of the room are a continuation of the box gutter that collects the water from the 2 roofs, where the water channels into that, then into the guttering around the room. So it's all one continuous circle of water.
And how many leaders do you anticipate having?
Just 2's fine.
Just 2?
Yeah, because they're very large gutter that we put up there.
Thank you.
Other questions from members of the board? Yes.
So, the question that I have is, you have 25 feet from the edge of the structure to the property line.
Yep.
But then you have a retaining wall. So what is the distance, effective distance between, the edge of the structure to the retaining wall?
Where it says, well, the 25 feet comes to where it says stone masonry, that is the property line.
That is the property line,
Yeah,
correct? Yes. But the question is, that is the property line, but you have a stone wall. So what is that distance?
To the first stone wall.
To the first stone wall.
You got 2 walls where it's tiered up.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
the
the-
first one
the
you
first
get
one,
to,
yeah.
not the one that's on the property.
I don't
line.
have a scale ruler with me, so
Well,
but I would say,
I'm going to approximate it to be between 7.5 and 8 feet.
8 feet, okay.
this, between one tier wall, and I thought you were talking about the other one, no.
No, between the ends of the conservatory to the first wall. It's going to be almost 8 feet.
No, it'd be more than that, Garrett, I think, because you've got 25 feet up to these. You look at the width of that, that's a greater distance.
Yeah, 'cause I know we left it an open sight line.
Okay, I'll take 8 feet. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from members of the board? Are there any members of the audience who have questions, statements, testimony, anything you want to say about the application? Anything further the 2 of you want to add before you discuss and vote on the application?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'd just like to finish off with saying that Mr. Yebernetsky's hardship is that positioning of the house, which obviously was allowable back then with such a small setback there, and because it doesn't meet the setbacks now of the house. You know, so that's his hardship, that it's impossible to do anything, you know. And I don't believe this is a monstrosity of a unit, and as far as it being overlooked by neighbours, it's virtually impossible to see it in that position that it's in.
And I've had, you can't see my neighbors from above the hill. They can't even see the addition. And I've had conversations with neighbors on both sides of me, especially the one to the south. They're thrilled that I'm doing it. They think it's going to enhance the house and actually give them a little, even a little bit more privacy for my patio. So, I mean, I got their approval.
We'll start discussion with Mr. Church.
I have no problem with this.
Okay, Mr. Moore.
I'm in favor of the application. I think that it would be a nice addition, aesthetic, to the house. And I will also await to see if there are any stipulations from my colleagues, but overall, I'm in favor of the application.
Wonderful.
And
Thank you.
hopefully it's a strong structure, you know. My mind kind of goes out there a little bit, but you know, there are kind of hawks in that area, right? So if it's landing on there, hopefully the structure's strong enough, because that's they're heavier than snow, that it's safe and all of that. But I think it'll be
I'm dealing with the best in the industry.
fantastic. Fantastic.
Thank you for that, Garrett.
You're
Fantastic.
quite welcome. I mean, you've got a reputation that is incredible.
Mr. Vieira,
I'm in favor of the application.
Ms. Harris.
I'm in favor of the application, given just the size of the lot and the way the existing structure is situated. There's no way that they would be able to meet the rear yard setback. They don't meet it now. And I think the lot coverage, the fact that they're 0.2% over is de minimis, and I would be okay approving this application.
Mr. Caulfield.
The hardship is the house is pushed back in these areas. You're 52 foot, you know, from the front yard to that. That puts this back. That's why we're so tight back there.
It's a strange lot, very strange
But
lot.
you're not the only one. Everybody up in that area, Upper Mountain, all those places don't have backyards. Understandable. But I'm in favor. Good luck.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I'm not in favor. I'm not going to give a long speech. And I mean, the way this subdivision is done is unfortunate. They built very large houses on lots that weren't really designed for them. Granting a variance wouldn't be an issue. It's the extent of what is a new deviation on the rear yard that is giving me pause, but I'll leave that there, and someone want to make a motion?
Move approve this application.
Second.
All in favor? I'm sorry.
I can say all in favor.
Sorry.
All in favor, say aye.
Do you want me to do a roll call vote, or?
I think it'll be clear.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Me.
Enjoy your observance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You got my address, you know, when it's check it out.
The next application is that of Amy and George Howard.
We're done.
It's an application for a variance to construct a rear addition, property located at 154 Montclair Avenue. The property is in the R1 one-family
Thank
zone
you.
district. The property
Thank you
is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 15 and Block 3413. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45C1 to allow a side yard setback to the addition of 4 feet 7 inches where 6 feet is required. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes, I do.
State your name and address, please.
Amy Howard, 154 Montclair Avenue.
Okay, you can proceed.
So I'm the owner of the home and acting as the architect. I'm a licensed architect in New Jersey. We are proposing to remove an existing pergola on the rear deck of the home and in its place construct a approximately 5-foot by 10-foot mudroom, rear addition conditioned space. The reason we need a variance is because the existing house and the existing deck actually sit within the 6-foot required setback. So by keeping the new mudroom in line with the deck and the current pergola, it puts it within 4'7" of the setback, so about 1'5" in. There will be no change to the impervious surface area, and the plan for water runoff is to tie into the existing gutters and the leader on the side of the house that drains underneath the deck and away from the neighbor. And the reasons for the shape and the proportion of the mudroom are aesthetic and architecturally to follow the lines of the existing house and the existing deck, to create a double-loaded storage space in the mudroom, and to maintain light coming in because the kitchen only actually has one window. So that's why sort of the width makes sense of the space. And by changing out the existing doors out to the back deck to increase privacy a little bit, because it's currently 3 large glass panels. So that's pretty much the entire application.
Sarah, any questions?
So the area of the proposed mudroom that's inside of the setback,
Yes.
that's just counter space? Is that all that's proposed there?
I'll just step up here. So the idea is that there would be...
Sorry, could you use the mic?
Oh, yes.
So that the recorder picks it up. Don't worry about that, it's fine.
Yes, so this side is planned to be cubbies, tall storage space, and this side is planned to be countertop space with upper cabinets above it.
Okay, and if you were to just configure this so it was within the setback, you would lose a window?
I would actually lose the double storage. I would probably only have one side of storage.
Okay, but what would that do to your exterior elevation?
So that, well, it wouldn't align with the edge of the house. If you look at this photo of the back at the left, it would sort of set in from the edge of the house, which sort of feels a little funny architecturally.
Okay, thank you.
You're using the same clapboard siding for that?
Yeah.
Okay, it's just the drawing was a little bit different.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Church?
Yeah, this the mudroom will encompass the end of the pergola to the wall, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
to the bump out.
To the what?
The bump, there's this small existing bump out that they must have added on at some point to put a powder room.
Okay.
So the new mudroom will extend from the edge of the deck where the current pergola is over to that face of that bump out.
And the entrance to that mudroom is where now? I'm sorry.
Centered on the,
What's that?
it's centered right here on the space.
Okay, good. And then the entrance, the kitchen's not being changed at all?
The entrance to the kitchen, well, right now it's a 3-panel glass
Okay.
with a door in the middle, so that will be removed. And it's actually going to be slightly shrunk down to add a little bit of countertop space and storage to
I
the
got you.
kitchen.
Okay. I see. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Moore?
So just the programming again, so over the, what did you call that, an awning, not an awning?
Pergola.
Pergola.
Mhm.
So that would be a new mudroom, that would be extended out,
Yeah.
right, that whole width?
That will be removed, and the mudroom will be in its place.
Right, right, and so then it would just expand to the existing? The bump out that's right next to the,
This one here?
yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
So it would just be one long contiguous mudroom, or would you change?
Well,
the
this will
configuration?
remain, this is a powder room and just sort of the end of the corridor.
Okay.
That stays as is.
Okay.
So it's just this new sort of 5x10 mudroom space.
And your reasoning for it is just, it's an awkward space, tell me your
The
reason.
mudroom, like the function of the mudroom?
Of the pergola, yeah.
The pergola, actually, I don't know what the function of, the pergola was there when we bought the house. We don't use it for anything. I imagine you probably could grow vines on it or something, but there's not really anything to it. The mudroom itself, the new mudroom, will act as sort of a drop-off area for the kids, rather than my kitchen exploding.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Vieira?
No questions.
And just so I'm clear, the proposed mudroom will actually be further from the side yard than that corner of the existing house, is
Yes,
that correct?
that's correct.
Okay. Are there any members of the audience who have questions, comments, testimony, or you like coming to Board of Adjustment meetings and watching us?
He's my intern.
Ah, you were forced to come here and sit through this.
I told him he could leave after the first
Okay. Anything further you want to add before we discuss and vote on the application?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, start discussion, Mr. Moore.
I'm in favor of the application.
Mr. Vieira,
I'm also in favor.
Ms. Harris.
Just ask one more question, I'm sorry. What's on the other side of the property line, on your neighbor's property, where you're proposing the mudroom?
It's pretty much the back of her house. I'm trying to think of the exact extents, but it's basically the back of her house. She actually has a pergola in that spot on her side of the property.
Yeah. This shows,
But that's the front, right?
oh, it's looking back, I mean, you can see their house goes back further, but there are shrubs between the two at that rear. I'm not
Yes.
sure whose shrubs they are.
I think it's a combination, mostly hers, but there are, I think, one or two on our property.
And those are basically where the mudroom is proposed, and I couldn't see how far back they went from the street.
From the street. I mean, you can see the pergola from the street if you really look for it in the wintertime.
I think the question is, what will your neighbor be able to see?
Of the mudroom,
Yeah, of the addition.
she will just see the side wall of it, which does not have a window or anything, just siding.
I think I'm in favor of this application, just because the proposed mudroom is further away from the property line than the existing house. But I also think that you might be able to fit it within the 6-foot setback, so I will hear what everyone else has to say.
Mr. Caulfield?
So I see that you purchased this house in November, and, you know, everyone who purchases a house in Montclair always has to find a mudroom somehow. So, good luck on that journey and everything. I don't know, I'm gonna be in favor of this, just because I had these mudroom conversations with myself. It is close to the line, but, you know, I can be in favor.
Mr. Church?
Yeah, I think it's a good utilization of a dead space. I mean, if you're not using the pergola, you're not using that area, it's a good, I don't think the setback's a big problem in there. So I'd be in favor.
Okay, I'm also in favor. I think, you know, we've normally done extensions of the house, which is what really this is, where it's either following the line or no closer. Here, your lot line goes back towards the house, but even with that, you know, and the front part of the house on that side, you know, first goes to 2.75 feet, then it steps back a little, but then because the lot line is then it's 2.35, you're proposing this 4 feet 7 inches, which, you know, is, depending on which one you're doing, is a 2 foot plus improvement on the existing setback. So on that basis, and you're following the line of the deck, and I don't have a problem. I am intrigued to the pergola. They might have put an awning over it, and may have been what it's,
Right.
because there's no real place you could put vines to get
Right.
over, which would be the
Right,
other
from under the
explanation.
deck.
But, and let me ask a question. Do your plans show the stormwater that you testified, or is that?
There's a photo of the existing leader, and
Right.
on the right side of the, oh, do you mean underneath? I do not have that on the plan.
Okay, so we should put a condition on that the stormwater be directed away from the
Yep.
neighbor's property. Okay, someone want to make a motion?
I'd make a motion to accept this application with that proviso that the water be drained away from the neighbor's property.
I second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, go build your mudroom.
Okay, guys.
Sure. Okay, so we don't need a meeting first week in June, correct? Correct. And how busy are we?
There's 3 or 4 scheduled in June, and then we have a couple more in July.
Okay.
The ones in June and July, there's a couple big ones, site plans.
And can you have Janice follow up on the appointments which had momentum and then didn't? And I know the council's been busy on exciting topics.
Yes, I will ask her to follow up on that.
It's not that hard,
Good.
guys.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. See you in a month.
Yeah.